evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the City Council, Monday, October 17th, 6 p.m. to order. And first, I'd like to begin with the land acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather and that is currently known as the City of West Hollywood is the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrieleño Tongva and Gabrieleño Kizh peoples. Will Katie Del Ponte lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Great.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Katie. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Councilmember D'Amico.
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson.
Present.
Councilmember Horvath. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Shine. Mayor Meister.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Can we get a report of closed session agenda from the city attorney?
Yes, good evening. The City Council convened a closed session this evening at 5:30 p.m. There were no members of the public to provide public comment. The council discussed the one item of business listed on the posted agenda and took no reportable action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will talk about approval of our agenda. Does staff have any changes they would like to make?
No, Mayor, there are no changes from staff this evening.
Okay, do my colleagues, how about Councilmember Erickson?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I was wondering if we could move item 5A, the council calendar, to consent. Item 6B, which is, I think, the code update for the Juneteenth holiday in the municipal code.
I would like to separate the start time for council, which is section 2.08.040. If we can actually table that part and leave the other part move the other part to consent, that would be great, because I think with new council members coming on board, there might be time issues. So to codify a time that we're all comfortable with and not include new council members.
That's fine by me.
Okay, that would be great. So we will move to consent 6B, section 2.08.030.
And then I was going to move, see if we could move item 4C. It was the Plummer Park pilot off-leash program. I do know that, no.
I have a direction, but we can move it to consent, and then if not, we could pull it.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I think the direction is that we all agreed to come back with turf at some point, but we knew that they were going to do wood chips in the pilot program, so that cost wouldn't be attributed to something that might not be permanent when we looked at the Plummer Park redesign as a whole, which is why it was put as wood chips for right now, but coming back in a future one, we wanted to do turf.
Is
Sure.
your issue a different issue?
No, it's the same issue.
Okay.
But I don't
We can
know.
talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just leave it on.
Right.
the
Are we going to
agenda
leave it
then.
on?
Yeah.
Then we'll leave it.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
Can we move item 6A?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
6A is,
It's the ordinance of the City of West Hollywood amending Title 17 of the West Hollywood Municipal Code relating to a repeal of the freeze on rent increases, limit on the annual general adjustment, bad faith rent increases, and the exemption of no-cost interim or transitional housing for people experiencing homelessness.
yes,
Great.
okay. Anyone else? So we're good. So 6A, we will move to consent. Anything else? Can I, 4A, which is the agreement for services with Perkins and Will for architectural services for the design of the Playhouse. Is everybody okay with that?
I have some direction, but I'll just give it in my comments.
Okay. So right now we have 4A, 5A, part of 6B, and 6A. I'm sorry. Yeah. 6A and 6B. Anything else?
That's it.
Nope. Going once, going twice? Okay. And then we will table the part of 6B that has to do with section 2.08.040. And we have a motion to adopt. Councilmember Horvath, seconded by Councilmember D'Amico. And we have an agenda. Okay. Adjournment motions. Anybody? Councilmember Erickson?
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. I have two adjournment motions tonight. The first one is Phyllis Dykes, who passed away on Saturday, October 15th at the age of 95. She was mom to Patty Dykes, who was a friend. I met him one of my first days in graduate school at Claremont Graduate University. The second is Betty Bailey, who passed away surrounded by her family when she was 89 years old on October 11, 2022 in Burlington, Wisconsin. She was the grandmother to my brother-in-law and the great-grandmother to my nieces and nephews, and I wanted to send all my love to Carol, her daughter, and my whole family back in Wisconsin.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. So since the start of the protests for freedom in Iran and since Mahsa Amini was killed by the government of Iran, as you all know, there have been continued protests and continued killing of protesters in Iran. There have been reports of more than 233 people killed, but these numbers are likely very underreported. Many of the people killed by the Iranian government have been children. So tonight I want to focus on some of their names. At least 23 have been brutally shot by live gunfire in streets. And tonight, I say their names. Nika Shakarami, age 16. Serena Ismailzadeh, age 16. Sodais Kashani, age 14. Ali Barahoui, age 14. Amir Hossein Basati, age 15. Mohammad Iqbak Naib Zahi, age 16. Zakaria Khial, age 16. Samer Hashem Zahi, age 16. Omid Safar Zahi, age 17. Mehdi Asghari, Pedram Azarnush, Siavash Mahmoudi, Abdul Mahmoud Pur. There was a fire in Evin prison, which was likely a mass murder of political prisoners by the Iranian government that include Baha'is, protesters, women, and LGBTQ Iranians. Please continue sharing about what is happening in Iran. Please continue supporting those who are fighting for freedom. This must continue, the support for Iranian and the Iranian people for their freedom until this government is toppled. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Horvath?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to adjourn tonight in memory of Amparo Villa, who was the mother of Victor Naro, an immigrants' rights and labor activist and project director for the UCLA Labor Center. Our condolences go out to Victor and his entire family. Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else? Okay. We will then move on to presentations. And who would like to, I think I'll begin. I have a presentation here for Assembly Member Richard Bloom. In 2012, Assembly Member Richard Bloom was he was elected to the California State Assembly 50th District. He has honorably served our community for 10 years. During his tenure, Assembly Member Bloom prioritized affordable housing, homelessness, climate change and environmental protections, LGBTQ protections, animal welfare, and many other relevant issues within the region. Richard was always extremely receptive to the concerns and needs of the city of West Hollywood, its residents, and business community. Richard worked diligently with the city of West Hollywood to advance legislation to allow cities to recover some of the funds for bonds that had been issued prior to the dissolution of the redevelopment agencies in California. Through his perseverance, cities throughout the state, including the city of West Hollywood, were able to receive millions of dollars of disputed redevelopment funding. Richard was also involved in legislative efforts to address the housing crisis, increase tenant protections, and expand affordable housing options, including efforts to reform the Ellis Act, encourage the development of accessory dwelling units, and restore the authority to adopt local inclusionary housing policies. The City Council hereby wishes to extend its highest praise to Assemblymember Richard Bloom and thank him for his years of tireless leadership and support. Richard, will you come up? And would all my colleagues come down?
Well, thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. This is very, very nice of you, and I'm not ready for it, frankly. As the days of my final term begin to wane, I've become very wistful about the time that I've spent in the legislature and in local government as well. I can honestly say I've enjoyed not every moment, but virtually every moment of it. And as you referenced, Mayor, have been able to be involved in many of the issues that are not just important to me, but are important to the city of West Hollywood. In fact, I think we have an identity of interest on virtually every issue that you listed that I've worked on. I've always felt very, very supported by the city of West Hollywood. And of course, it is my favorite city in AD 50 tonight. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I do want to acknowledge Josh Kerpies, my district director, who is a WeHoan, and very, very proud of the work that Josh has done in running the district office and also being assigned to West Hollywood and paying very, very close attention to our constituents who are here in this city. So thank you again. I appreciate it. I'm not going away. I'm still just going to be a few miles down the road. I'll be here and look forward to coming back. Very, very regrettable that I was not able to, with Robbie, ride in this year's parade on the Segway that I've become known for. But I'll try to come back in future years and reprise that role. Thank you all.
Thank you, Richard. And now we have a presentation, Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Horvath.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, when I was sworn in at my first council meeting, Councilmember Horvath and I brought forward an item to create the Social Justice Task Force, and they have done an impeccable job meeting and working hard and having thorough discussions on recommendations that are coming to us that I won't talk about now because that's later, but recommendations that were meant to help this council really dismantle racism in the city of West Hollywood. And I want to thank staff that did such a wonderful job stewarding the task force, as well as a consultant that did an impeccable job just bringing everything together. You are all so resilient, and the work that you've done is so important for the city of West Hollywood. And tonight we honor each and every one of you. The Social Justice Task Force is absolutely historic in the city of West Hollywood because it's really the first time that Black, Indigenous, and other people of color have had a seat at the table. And it is so important to have a seat at the table for BIPOC folks. And there need to be more of us in power, and more of us representing our perspectives and giving our perspective to other folks who don't have our experiences. So thank you for your work, and I'm going to have my colleague, Councilmember Horvath, continue.
I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem for bringing this idea forward on the campaign trail and in community dialogue before it became legislation. I think she really planted very important seeds that our task force helped to grow. And while a task force is exactly that, a group of people tasked with a very specific set of outcomes, we know that this work is ongoing in order for it to be sincere and authentic and realized in our community. This is a roadmap that gives us an opportunity to actually do the right thing. And so this work, it does not end tonight, but while we acknowledge the roadmap that you have given us, it is imperative that we all take seriously the full implementation of the recommendations that you have outlined, both as a city body and in the culture that we continue to create in our community. So I thank you for the work that you have done, the path that you have helped to start to create in our community, and I thank you for the many hours that you've given, the intentionality you brought to the work that you did, and we hope that your voices will continue to lead us to a brighter future. Thank you very much for your service, and we will call each of you up. Mayor Pro Tem, if you'd like to start.
Yes, so calling up Jonathan Wilson, Chair of the Social Justice Task Force.
I think we're going to do it all together. So if you want to stay up here, and then we'll join you, and we'll take a picture together. Next, I'd like to welcome up our Vice Chair, Daniel Zamilpa, I believe, who is joining us by Zoom.
Okay. Next is my appointee, Mito Aviles.
Next is Shayla Demure.
Also joining us by Zoom, Krupa Desai. Okay, she's not able to be here.
Appointee Shannon Morton.
Next is Jorge Separac.
Next, I'd like to welcome up Giselle Washington.
And lastly, Marcus Wilson Smith.
Our colleagues will join us for a photo.
I was asked to say a few words.
Yes,
and,
please.
It wouldn't be right to say a few words alone. So it's better to have everybody here. But on behalf of the task force, just really thank you for this opportunity. This is something that has been needed for the city of West Hollywood for such a long time. And, without your leadership, without your commitment to making this happen, this would not have come true. There's more work to be done, and we're excited about the opportunity to partner with you along the way, ideally. But thank you. And is there anything else that any of you would like to say? Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to move on now to public comment. The City Council values your comments. However, pursuant to the Brown Act, Council cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. The public comment period is limited to 20 minutes, with 2 minutes allotted for each speaker. This public comment period is to address the City Council on consent calendar items, other agenda items, if the member of the public cannot be present at the time the item is considered, or items of general interest within the jurisdiction of the City Council. Another period is also reserved for general comment later in the meeting for those who cannot be heard at this time. And we will begin. And we will start with Rick Watts, to be followed by Ms. Tiger.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Rick Watts, City of West Hollywood, current chair of the Disabilities Advisory Board. The riddle of the Sphinx, which many of you probably know, goes what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening. And the answer, of course, is us, human beings, men, women, because the point with the 3 legs is that as we age, at some point, many of us, most of us, will end up needing a cane or dealing with other types of disabilities. Almost all of us will deal with disabilities at some point. And the city has more than its share of persons with disabilities, whether it's HIV, AIDS, dealing with the after effects of COVID, and various other types of infirmities, visible and not visible. The Disabilities Advisory Board serves as a sounding board, as it were, between the various disabilities communities and the city government, spreading the word as to the services that you folks provide, and feeding suggestions and complaints up the food chain. October is Disabilities Awareness Month, and as a part of the things that the board is doing is on this Thursday at 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. over at Plummer Park in the courtyard of Great Hall. We'll be having a free flu and COVID vaccinations clinic. Flu and COVID season are around the corner again. And then also on, so please come and get your vaccines if you've not already. And then next Wednesday at 6 p.m., we will be having our Disability Service Awards, which will be virtual again this year because of the COVID pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. Ms. Tiger, to be followed by Esther Baum.
Good evening, City Council, City staff. Last meeting, there was a comment that was made, and I believe this was made in response to public comments made by community. Shortly after myself and Commissioner Steele voiced our opinions about the frustration over the LGBTQ+ Commission purview, as well as Pride, Councilmember Erickson used the words that folks were dramatical. I believe that was the term. It was also said by Councilmember Erickson that you guys were the ones making the decisions. And I don't think anybody was debating that. And for any of us to make a comment and be in communication, and then it be referred to as dramatical or reminded that we're not making the decisions, I think is very unfortunate. What we were trying to say is, we're community. You appointed us as a body on the LGBTQ+ advisory board. We have very, very important opinions and perspectives on the LGBTQ+ Commission and Pride. Nobody was trying to do anything other than that. We have asked for a special meeting with City Council regarding the purview for our commission. And I would just like to say, you know, words do matter, and we should all be mindful of the context and the moment in which we speak. And I don't think hearing from community that community should be referred to as dramatical or reminded that we don't make decisions. We do make decisions, especially at the polls. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tiger. Esther Baum, to be followed by Stephanie Harker.
Esther Baum, 32-year resident of West Hollywood and over 28 years on the senior board. I want to remind all of us that West Hollywood was established as a city because of rent being out of line. 6% increase in rents for seniors is unacceptable. 90% of them would be on the street homeless because they could not pay that large an increase. I think having 3% as a maximum is fair, and I hope that the City Council and the city agree to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Stephanie Harker, to be followed by Steve Martin.
Good evening, council members, mayor. Stephanie Harker, City of West Hollywood. It seems we stood and talked like this before COVID. I just have a few things to say on a few topics. 2D, the teleconferencing, is going to continue for a few of the boards and commissions, and which I'm happy about. But I hope that at some point you will all go back to the thought that everything is recorded so that it can be listened to at another time. I think the participation level leaped during COVID because people didn't have to race home and feed their kids or take the dog out or whatever. And I just think that more output is good. And if we could go back to that, I think we had approved it at some time. I'd love to see all of these meetings recorded in case you want to go back and listen to it at a later time. I have concerns about 2G, the fossil fuel stations, fewer of them. Until we have actual rapid transit, which we don't really have. Buses are not rapid, they're in the same traffic as everybody else. I don't want to have to be driving somewhere or have our citizens driving somewhere and using more gas to look for gas to buy. 2H, increased compensation. You guys deserve it. You probably should have given yourselves more. And I just want to remind voters to look carefully at the propositions that are on. Some of them are so confusing, it basically amounts to vote yes on no. So be aware, because we had Proposition 47 that we all voted for, and now we use that as the reason for having more crime, because the Prop 47 was called the Safe Schools and Neighborhood Act, which let people out. And so be sure and check those propositions. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Steve Martin, to be followed by Mary Glover.
Steve Martin, West Hollywood. And I would want to second what Ms. Tiger said. Often we hear from our boards and commissions, you tell them that they're appointed because you want to hear from them and get community input. But, they're meant to serve, not rubber stamp. And I think at times we have to be careful what we say. Our adjectives can be just as important as our pronouns. As a city council candidate, I would say that I am opposed to cutting lanes on Fountain. I'm opposed to cutting sheriff's deputies, and I'm opposed to the merger of Kruger and Albertsons, and I hope the city council will do everything they can to protect consumers from that merger. I also promise, if elected, I will wear long pants. I'm probably not going to keep that promise. But anyway, I know some people have felt that perhaps it's less than respectful to come here dressed the way I do, but I don't mean any disrespect. If anything, I want to feel comfortable, and I want people to feel comfortable with me. I want to be a council member who's just like your neighbor, because I am. That's all I am. I'm just a person like all of you. There shouldn't be any wall between us. We don't need the props of a suit and tie, although it is very appropriate when you are sitting up there. But I've never had a problem coming before the council, standing over here, just as I really enjoyed my 2 terms being on city council. And I think it's important for people to understand that we can be effective as community members, both on the council and off the council. And it's so important to show up and be heard. And if I'm elected, if I'm fortunate enough to gain people's confidence, I want to be a council member that you'll be proud of and that you will listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Mary Grover, to be followed by E.W. Grover.
Good evening. I'm speaking to you from the standpoint of small landlords. I don't have dozens of units, and in fact, my family, we only have 4 units. And I think you'd like to know that they were built in 1906. Our family moved here when the town was not West Hollywood, it was Sherman. And my grandfather, may he rest in peace, built 4 units starting in 1906. Up until recently, we had people living there for 40 to 50 years until they passed away. And we have new tenants now, and they stay, we hope, just as long. But it's important that you know that because of inflation, we make very little return on this property, and we put a lot into it. My brother is 80 years old. I'm no spring chicken, and we were hoping we could use this money for our retirement years. But we can't. If you've ever seen our property, you'll see it's pristine, and it takes a lot of money and a lot of time to do that, to keep our tenants happy and safe. But with the rent cap, we can't do that very well. I just want to point out that we love West Hollywood. We wouldn't have been here through Prohibition, the Depression, the hippie years, the drug years. We wouldn't have stayed here 116 years if we didn't love the community and want to grow with it. So we love it so much that we'd like to make a return on our investment too. And it's an investment that we made 116 years ago. And so we hope you look at it from the point of view of people that aren't multimillionaires. They're scraping to get by on both sides of the fence, both the landlords and the tenants. There are 2 sides to the story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. E.W. Grover, to be followed by Victor Omolchenko.
Thank you. This proposal to cap the rent increase this year at 3% during rampant inflation shows a fundamental lack of understanding of how business works. Its conclusion comes without evidence or understanding of basic economics, which begs the question, why then should the city follow any of its conclusions? Rent increases need to account for inflation. It's basic math. Landlords have a right to pay their bills and raise rents when bills increase. Show me a business that is not allowed to raise its prices during inflation, and I will show you a former business. What happens next year if we hit 12% inflation again? You are dooming locals to default on their properties. Let us protect ourselves from inflation. I am not BlackRock. I'm not a publicly traded fund. I'm not a REIT. I'm not a giant corporation. Why is the city seeking to destroy our livelihoods with this proposal? The average household income in West Hollywood is $80,000 a year almost. Social Security next year is being raised almost 9%. The city has it in their budget to pay for those who cannot. It's time property owners stop taking it on the chin. It's not our fault. Inflation's not our fault. The pandemic's not our fault. Thank you.
Thank you, EW. Victor Omolchenko, to be followed by Danny Wang.
I was asked, where are the screens for closed captioning that Gene Dobrin used to use? It's an ADA requirement. And now I'll start speaking. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Victor Omolchenko, West Hollywood resident, here tonight in the height of this campaign season, this volatile campaign season, to alert you to some potential criminal activity related to the tearing down of campaign signs throughout the city. I shop in the local delis on the east side, and when I went this past Sunday to get my fresh borscht that I like so much, I noticed that the signs of two candidates had been removed from the window of the deli. I alerted the store's owner, who said the signs had been up that Saturday, but that she enters her establishment from the rear and had not noticed them missing on Sunday when I brought the matter up. One mistake had been made. It turns out that the signs for city council candidates Robert Oliver and Stephen Martin had been affixed to the outside of the windows, and perhaps they should have been posted from the inside. And in my own neighborhood, on my own street, other campaign signs posted in front yards have also gone missing. You know, we're all worried about what's happening with democracy and civic discourse across the nation. And it's truly sad that there are individuals who are tearing down signs locally. And we've seen the turmoil and the chaos that ensued after 3 Los Angeles City Council members and the president of the Los Angeles County Federation of Labor, Ron Herrera, were revealed on recordings to be spewing racist and homophobic slurs. I wonder how the culprits tearing down the signs here in West Hollywood would react to any video recordings that may come as an October surprise before the November 8 election. And regarding endorsements, I know that Councilmember Horvath, running for county supervisor, has asked that Bob Hertzberg renounce his endorsements of Councilmember Cedillo and De Leon, as well as former Labor Federation President Ron Herrera. I agree with those requests. They are reasonable and needed. But the sword cuts both ways. Will our city council candidates, Chelsea Byers, Robert Oliver, and Zekiah Wright, now renounce the endorsement of Ron Herrera? We don't need a video for that. Just a statement will do. Thank you, and everyone, remember to vote. Democracy depends on it.
Thank you, Victor. Danny Hang, followed by MJ Godges.
Greetings, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, staff, and distinguished guest, Assemblymember Bloom. My name is Danny Hang, and I'm a resident of West Hollywood. I just wanted to express my support for the following items. 2U, co-sponsorship of the National Trans Visibility March. 2V, co-sponsorship of the Red Cross Red Dress Party Day event. 2W, co-sponsorship of the Trans Latin Coalition's Garas Fashion Show fundraiser. 2X, West Hollywood Artists and Icons series, as well as 6A, the amendment of RSO Title 17. I'm very grateful to live in a city that values protections for renters. And lastly, I just want to say congratulations to the Social Justice Task Force. You guys did an amazing job. I look forward to reading the report, and the work is not done. It's always going to be continuing. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. MJ Godges, to be followed by Wes Siegmiller.
Good evening, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. My name is MJ Godges, WeHo citizen. And tonight I'm here to speak on behalf of our West Hollywood Park bees. Obviously, they couldn't be here tonight, but they certainly visit our new rooftop swimming pools quite frequently. And many times while I'm in the pool, I'll scoop out about 5 bees that are struggling and drowning. I'm guessing they're desperate now for water in this drought. Looking for a solution, I contacted the LA County bee inspector, and he said the bees are in fact looking for water and there must be a hive nearby that needs to be removed. He also recommended a simple solution of leaving out a couple 5-gallon buckets full of water around the periphery of the pool with wine corks floating on the top. He said the bees need to step on something while they retrieve the water. It was near this time I was leaving the pool on a Saturday morning, and I came upon Mayor Meister. She was doing the Meet the Mayor at the WeHo Park. So this gave me a chance to tell her about all of this going on and some encounters with bees my fellow swimmers had just that morning. The mayor referred me to WeHo Public Works Department, and Helen Collins got right back to me. She told me the beekeeping contractor had actually just removed a hive. It was near the swimming pools at the next door rooftop tennis courts. The hive was safely removed and relocated by the beekeepers. So I did then notice a decrease in the bees in the pool. The last day before the pool closed for repairs, just as I was leaving, I think it was the last one in the water, I saw a bee was on the lane line next to me. I let it dry out on my wrist as we walked out together to a safe place in the shrubs. To my fellow WeHo rooftop swimmers, know that the city is regularly monitoring for hives. And if a bee lands on you, try not to panic and flail about, scaring it into stinging. Our WeHo bees are just also trying to go about their business. Thank you, Mayor, for following up, and the City of West Hollywood for always being pro-bee. Thank you.
Thank you, MJ. Wes Siegmiller.
Good evening, my name is Wes Sigmiller. Happy Disabilities Awareness Month. I myself am someone who lives with a chronic medical disability caused by pharmaceutical injury, and so to quote Larry Block, please don't forget about us. First of all, thank you for supporting the Trans Latina Coalition GARA's fashion show. I've been a part of that community for a very long time, and all of the people in that group, they have saved lives. And it might seem like a big amount of money for what amounts to, a spectacular fashion show, but it's so much more than that. To quote another community leader, Bambi Salcedo, we are community investments, and that's why we are here. So thank you so much. Specifically, I'm here to support 4D, and Seppi Mishine, I'd like to thank you for spearheading that initiative that was so long overdue. Particularly, I was really happy to see recommendations to further support sex workers in West Hollywood by contracting with sex worker-led community groups, specifically Sex Workers Outreach Project LA, so shout out to my people, to provide legal services and to further get people that are involved in the sex trade out of the criminal justice system as much as possible. So thank you so much for everything. And just with the last 10 seconds, I'd just like to say that I'm a former sex worker, and I got out of that industry about 4 years ago. And I was already out of the industry when I made the conscious decision to publicly disclose that I was a sex worker in order to help get justice for the victims of Ed Buck. So I am not ashamed of being a sex worker, and it is so important that we do not stigmatize sex workers. And Mr. Erickson, I would appreciate it if you please communicate it to your supporters that that is not acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. If we can take Zoom calls, thank you.
Our first speaker on Zoom is Max Sherman. Max, you will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Very much. Good evening, members of the council. My name is Max Sherman, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. As discussed in detail in our comprehensive letter submitted on Friday, we are strongly opposed to the proposed permanent annual general adjustment limitation, inclusion of bad faith rent increase provisions, and we again urge the council to end the rent increase freeze immediately. For nearly 3 years, the city's small business housing providers have continued to be severely financially impacted as a result of the pandemic and related government mandates. While we appreciate the establishment of a clear end date to the moratorium, we ask why this emergency measure is not ending this year, as nearly all other jurisdictions, including Los Angeles County, have done. And just as the clear end of the moratorium is being defined, the council is now considering limiting all future rent increases permanently to a maximum of 3%, which is less than half of what the current RSO formula allows. As you heard from earlier public comment, how are mom and pop small business owners already on the verge of selling or losing their property expected to remain in business or properly maintain their buildings? The association is also strongly opposed to the proposed bad faith provision. There's no data showing evidence of a widespread issue to warrant such provisions are needed, and the vague language exposes rental housing writers to frivolous litigation and excessive criminal penalties. As the association has repeatedly raised, we urge the council to recognize the current dynamics existing today, bring an immediate end to the over 2-year-long rent increase freeze, maintain the current AGA formula, and reject the unsubstantiated bad faith provisions being proposed. Thank you for your time and consideration on these matters.
Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Our next speaker is Sanjay Gora, to be followed by Alex Stein. Sanjay, you will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Sanjay, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Sanjay, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you. Good evening. First, I would like to thank you for your public service. My name is Sanjay Gar. The drought condition in California, as we all know, is bad, and unfortunately, it is going to go dire. As you may know, we have 2 supply sources that supplies us water in Southern California. One is called the State Aqueduct. The second is called the Colorado River. In the last 10 years, the State Aqueduct has not been as reliable, and that's why we've seen this situation with the water supply and the drought. But the Colorado River has always been solid. It is our rock. This is not the case anymore. It is certain that we will have, I would like to metaphorically say, a heart attack in the sense of the water supply. Not for 1 year, but 10 years. We are truly entering into uncharted territory. West Basin Municipal Water District is responsible for providing us safe and reliable water. Unfortunately, this district has not shown sound judgment. The district has spent over $65 million in evaluating a desal project that led nowhere. It's important to note that this project did not produce any new water, nor, and it also was that $65 million came from us, from our money. In addition, the district did hire, a general manager with known sexual harassment settlements when he was hired. In addition, he had a conflict of interest. He was working for the largest vendor, and the recruiting firm, national recruiting firm that the district used, didn't even select him for an interview. Fortunately, this person is no longer with the district, but he created such a toxic work environment that 30% of the most qualified staff did leave. There's no question sound judgment is needed given the situation we're in. My name is Sanjay Gar. I've been passionate about water resource management since 1994. I have 2 master's degrees in this area, consulted many agencies throughout California. It would be my honor and privilege to bring this experience to West Basin Municipal Water District. I do have a plan to navigate these uncharted times, and I would just like you to think about me on November 8th. I am running for Board of Director Division 4. Again, I want to thank you for your public service. I know it's a lot of work for you all to do that, so thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. Mayor, our final speaker on Zoom is Alex Stein. Alex, you will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Mr. Stein, you'll have 2 minutes. Go ahead. Mr. Stein, go ahead. You'll have 2 minutes.
I think we can move on, and if that person wants to speak later when we have our second public comment period, that will work. We have some citizen position slips.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Victor Omolchenko submitted a citizen position slip in support of item 2X, as did Judson Fetter, both for items 2X. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to council member comments. Councilmember Horvath.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to ask you'll see our city manager is not with us tonight, so we have Oscar, who's helping to keep us in line tonight. We appreciate you sitting in and doing this work, and if you could relay the message. I know I shared earlier, we heard just before the meeting tonight that the governor has indicated that he'll end the time of emergency in February of next year, so perhaps we could start to get a sense at the local level what that's going to mean for us as a city, maybe at our next city council meeting as a receive and file maybe of what sort of action steps the city plans to take between now and then, so we can be prepared for that. Thank you. I'm going to abstain from item 2H as I did previously. Since our last city council meeting, I attended the SCAG Transportation Committee meeting, the Metro K-line opening of Crenshaw, and it's exciting to see the progress that's been made in real time since we've been serving, and so I'm excited to see that extension come to our community next, and thank you for everyone who's been helping to advocate. It was fun to celebrate, and I look forward to our own celebration here in West Hollywood. I also participated in the Liability Trust Fund meeting where we were discussing how the increase in rates for all participating cities were what helped us to sustain the fund, and we will likely need to increase again due to some of the large liability cases that we have seen. I also joined my colleagues in welcoming back the AIDS Walk to West Hollywood, which was a wonderful celebration this weekend. We're hoping that it will continue to grow in participation, welcoming back after the pandemic, and it's an important event that helps us bring together one another in community in a very important and special way. And I'm grateful that our colleague helped to lead them back to us, and that we had so many community members who participated in the AIDS Walk this year. With regard to item 4A, I would like to see the committee that was assigned to provide input to be consulted, especially when it's with regard to the Arts Commission, because they will be helping to program that space. So as the finishing touches and final decisions are being made in that space, I hope my colleagues would encourage our staff to work with those folks. That being said, I do know that Commissioner Torres will be stepping down, so she does not want to continue in that role, but I believe that the others would be interested in providing that service if it is required, just so we make sure that the space is usable by the people who intend to. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Erickson.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. On items on consent, I want to thank my colleagues for support of 2U. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Shine, for doing that item. Special shout out to Blossom Brown, who brought that item forward, and all of that will be on Saturday, November 5th. Item 2V, the Red Dress Party on December 4th with the Los Angeles Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. I believe we have a sister here in the back. But also I want to thank Billy Wilkin for reaching out to me and bringing back this really critical event that's such a part of our history. And I do believe timing is everything when we think about having the AIDS Walk on Sunday and then bringing back this really critical event for our community in the ongoing fight against HIV and AIDS. And I want to thank you, and I'm really looking forward to it, and I encourage everyone to go be a part of it on December 4th. Additionally, 2W, the Garris Fashion Show. I'm so excited this is finally in West Hollywood. One, because I don't have to drive to downtown Los Angeles on a Saturday night, so I'm a little bit biased, but it's going to be fabulous here in the Pacific Design Center, and really looking forward to seeing everyone there. And then item 2X, the Artist and Icon series. And I do have to thank former council member John Heilman, who talked to me about this way long ago when I still worked at the city and we were talking about it. But having Barbara Bain, for many of you who may or may not know who she is, Steve Martin, I'm sure you know who Barbara Bain is, right? But was an integral part of our community with the Actors Studio, but highlighting our amazing community members who have served here and their roles in the city is a great way to honor and uplift those voices. In terms of upcoming events, I hope everyone will join me tomorrow for Proposition 1, a town hall here in Chambers at 7 p.m. There are a lot of important propositions on the ballot, as I believe Stephanie Harker said in the back. I hope you all vote yes on Proposition 1. The city has taken a unanimous declaration supporting it, especially as America's first pro-choice city, to make sure we enshrine in the state constitution the federal right, the right to a safe and legal abortion, as well as contraceptives, because we don't know what's going to happen at the federal level anytime soon. Additionally, in terms of events I have attended the WeHo Reads Poet Laureate Across America event, the Skag Energy Committee and Regional Committee. I had my Plummer Park event on October 8th. I want to thank Victor Olmanchenko for riding 26.2 miles with me for Ciclavia, Heart of LA. Victor is one of the most intelligent historians I have ever met in my entire life. This man, we would bike by a house and he would know the history and everything that happened there. But it was a real gem and a tour to bike that whole time with you. So I want to thank you for giving me a little bit of your Sunday. I really enjoyed going along with you and being there. Oh, I had so much fun. And honestly, if you ever need to learn a history lesson about West Hollywood or Los Angeles in general, Victor's your man. And you get exercise at the same time, so it's worked. I did have an e-bike. Victor did that all by himself. So Victor could outchase Lance Armstrong off steroids. Additionally, I met with the West Hollywood Food Coalition and toured their new facility, and I want to thank them for all the work that they're doing and looking forward to that coming back for hopefully more exploration here in the city. I attended the Laughter on the Lawn event and then the AIDS Walk Los Angeles event, and I do want to reiterate what Councilmember Horvath said and thank John D'Amico for bringing that important event. It was great to be there with all of my colleagues, and as Mayor Meister was able to shout at the mic, welcome back to West Hollywood, while people were still there. Additionally, I actually want to thank Steve Martin for actually showing up to these meetings, right? Steve Martin makes very good points that if you are running for elected office and you want to hold those elected offices, maybe it would be good to be here in the policy item discussion of where it actually occurs. So Steve, looking forward to maybe seeing you in some pants, but I think you bring up a very good point that a lot of people don't talk about, is that civic participation actually does happen the first and third Monday of every month, and we do recognize who's here. Additionally, I want to thank the Social Justice Task Force members. We're going to talk more about this, but the service that you have provided to this community is truly unmeasurable. And I think it's a good reflection point for when we look at who we are and where we are as a city, as well as a country. There's a lot of times when people want to push back and say, go back to many ways when we look at diversity, inclusion, getting things right, getting things wrong, but how do we acknowledge that painful past, but how do we look towards the promise of the future? And all of you represent that promise, and you've reminded us of that past, but made sure that we have very tangible steps for the future, and I'm really looking forward to discussing that. But our city does owe you a debt of gratitude, and you have that from me, myself, but I'm really looking forward to seeing all the work that you will continue to do in the city, and you make me proud to sit on this dais. Additionally, I want to thank the city for partnering for another round of the test strip distributions for drink spiking. I want to thank everyone that attended the Queers Across the Years event. I was not able to go. I want to remind everyone to get boosted and get their flu shot at the DAB event on Thursday. Thank you, Rick Watts, for always reminding us. Yes, Esther Baum, the rent is too high, so we need to make sure that we're protecting our renters who are 80% of the city, especially our seniors and disabled. So that's why we did look at it's on consent, capping the rent there at 3%. And it's a really critical step. And then if David or Oscar could give a report back during your comments. I've gotten some inquiries about the public safety measures that the city is taking for Halloween. We are not, closing the street. Halloween is still occurring and going on, but it would be great if you could let the public know about what to expect that night should things get a little rowdy or anything else like that. And that is everything I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember D'Amico.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a quick couple of things. The first is I just wanted to, in fact, sort of build on one of the last things that Councilmember Erickson said, which is to thank the Social Justice Task Force for, showing up and specifically reach out to Jonathan Wilson and say, for 2 years you've been engaged in the city. Now it went by quick, right? You sent me an email and suddenly you were doing this and now you did that. And it's truly remarkable. And I think that's maybe the story of all of us is we sent an email or made a phone call and ended up getting involved in finding some of our purpose here. And John said this thing just now, the painful past and the promise of and you said future, and I guess what I wanted to maybe sharpen that a little bit and say the promise of the present, because it feels really present. It doesn't feel like we have to wait. It feels like, we sort of are, we're all here in this room and we're trying to do our best. So I just wanted to thank you, Jonathan, and of course all of you. But Jonathan, I think you really, it's super impressive to watch you sort of grow into that role for me. And I also wanted to thank my colleagues for sort of John for bringing forward the Red Dress Party and the other events that are on here, and all of the things that seem to begin to point to our city returning to us, or reinventing ourselves for a time after COVID. It feels like the governor is making choices around that, as one of our members of the public said. The county has made choices around that, and will be doing the same. And the world is not the same. It will never be the same. I certainly learned how to avoid getting a cold, and I plan to continue to avoid getting a cold. But I think COVID changed the world in all kinds of ways, and it's also nice to see that we're beginning to return to some of the things that were more regular about what was happening in our city. And I just wanted to talk about one of the items we moved to consent, which is the item 4A regarding the agreement with Perkins and Will. And Oscar, I think having sort of watched the long story of the development of the second half of the park project rollout, I think it would make sense to provide the council with a receive and file about all of the projects on our current capital programs list and who will be managing them, and have a sort of honest discussion with the council about whether there is enough management and oversight to work on Plummer Park, to work on Laurel, to work on this theater, to maybe do something at Crescent Heights, to work on the Sunset Strip lot, to work on the log cabin. And, I think all of those are incredible opportunities that can turn into very complicated problems that are very expensive as well. And so I just think, our city's commitment to having a much larger footprint is clear. We have one now, and I guess I wanted to also suggest that if the capacity is not in place for our city to do that, perhaps a conjoined effort by the West Side cities to have a management agreement. I'm sort of speaking a little bit from my history as a professional, that when you have a deep bench of people who can help solve problems instead of just one woman or one guy who's the guy or the woman, you have 50 people behind them, they can turn around and get an answer when it doesn't take, 6 weeks to get a new consultant or $35,000 to get an answer. You can just get an answer. So maybe there are ways for some kind of construction management effort to be larger than our city, if that makes sense. But I think there's a good lesson to be learned about taking on a big project with a lot of moving parts, and to make sure that our staff, most importantly, is supported through that effort in the right way, because they want to be successful, and we want to be successful, and the community wants us to be successful. So that was to everyone out there, I apologize for talking so much. That was a very long explanation to say I think we should get some kind of receive and file about the projects we have and the oversight, and then a recommendation about whether there's enough management in place. Thank you. Those are my comments, Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to address the racism and homophobia that most of us and those that have not been watching the news this past week and a half now, we always think of racism as being a outside of California thing, outside of a blue state, blue city thing. Something that we look at and go, oh, look at those racists who were attacking the Capitol building on January 6th. Look at the Trump supporters. They are so racist. And the reality is, racism is pervasive throughout this country, in every area. And what happened in LA City Council, the racism and homophobia, abuse of power by Nuri Martinez, Ron Herrera, Gil Cedillo, and Kevin De Leon, was awful. Awful to hear, awful to hear, awful to hear brown folks that are leaders in the city of LA just abusing their power, and in such an awful anti-Black way, rather than using their leadership to uplift and intersectionally uplift the Black community. For BIPOC folks, perhaps it's not such a surprise, because we see that even in progressive circles, racism exists because it is a structure that needs to be dismantled. So it's not a coincidence that our social justice task force is here tonight giving us recommendations on what we need to do. And I have to say, I am very grateful for my colleagues sitting here, because even though we all still have work to do, and there are still problematic issues, I'm grateful that none of my colleagues here have ever engaged in that type of blatant anti-Blackness, at least in front of me. I've never heard it, and I'm grateful that we are in a city that has created the Social Justice Task Force. And I will say that I don't know about Robert or Chelsea, but I have endorsed Zakiya Wright, and absolutely know that Zakiya was not personally endorsed by Ron Herrera. Zakiya was endorsed by the 800,000 members of the Federation of Labor. I, though, was endorsed by Kevin DeLeon, and I was absolutely embarrassed, and absolutely denounce his endorsement of my campaign. And I've called on him and Gil Cedillo to resign. It must happen. It must happen because in the present, leaders that have integrity will not stand or support any leader in power who is blatantly anti-Black and racist, because the former structures that have upheld racism in this country are crumbling, and we will all make sure that they crumble. So Kevin DeLeon and Gil Cedillo, please resign. Have some humility. Resign, resign, resign. Thank you. Now, since our last meeting, I have participated in the West Side Council of Governments board meeting. I attended the LA County Dem Party, the LA County Dem Party Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt Awards, and I was really honored to have been nominated and awarded as Democrat of the Year for Assembly District 51. Thank you. I also attended the AIDS Walk breakfast and kickoff. I'm so happy that the AIDS Walk LA has come back home. And I attended the West Hollywood Aquatics 40th year anniversary banquet this weekend, and I gave them a proclamation on behalf of council. And thank you to my colleagues for putting our items that John Erickson and I did on approving it for consent. The Trans-Latina Coalitions, Garas Fashion Show. I went last year and said, this needs to come to West Hollywood. And here we are, as well as the Trans Visibility March. Thank you to my TAB appointee, Blossom, for leading that. And we are a city that is 80% renters, and this city was built to protect renters, seniors, and LGBTQ folks. And we have absolutely done the right thing by putting on consent the rent max of 3% for the city of West Hollywood, and the rest of the provisions in that item. And that is all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. For me, I represented the West Side Cities COG on the Southern California Association of Governments CEHD committee. I welcomed participants to the Community Academy program and to the CERT program. I spoke at a reception for Lambda Alpha International members who are visiting Los Angeles from all over the country and Canada for a land economics weekend. And my colleagues and I welcomed APLA Health and AIDS walkers back to WeHo. It was very exciting to see the crowd back and have us be the hub of the start of the walk. Regarding the consent calendar, item 2E, the ordinance adopting Robertson Lane project changes. Please note my no vote. We're losing 200 parking spaces with that change. I've heard from staff that when the ARC is in full swing, we may not have enough parking at the city's 5-story parking garage, and that staff recommended approval of this change. I will just say, at the very least, is extremely disappointing, and disappointing that was passed by council majority. Regarding 2I, the ordinance establishing the LGBTQ+ commission, I understand that some members of the advisory board are not Very happy with the purview discussion that has been approved by council, and but I will say that staff will be looking at the purviews of all boards and commissions over this next year. So there is an opportunity to discuss this further, and also I know that there has been a request to meet with council, and I am open to having a meeting with the board anytime. Regarding 2L, the agreement for service with the HDL software, which is the rent stabilization database, I would like to give further direction to include questions on income level over and under the different breakpoints, so that we have a record of it moving forward, so that and the importance of this will be very obvious as we discuss item 4B, but there is no reason why we can't get that information, because when somebody applies for, puts in an application for housing, they typically are asked their income level, and while we don't need to have exact numbers, we can ask for over, under various levels to see which category, income category they would fall into to be able to use that for other purposes. Regarding 2P, the special event permit fee waiver for businesses on Halloween. So even though the city is not sponsoring an event this year, we are very supportive of people coming to our city to celebrate Halloween and to celebrate at all of our businesses. And this item supports our businesses by waiving special event fees. And we hope that it will be a great success as it was last year. Let's see, we moved some things around. So I did want to mention the two, Miss Grover and EW, I think it was, Grover, about item 6A. I would like planning to reach out to them to talk to them about the Mills Act. It looks like they may have historic property. If it was built in 1905, it very well might be a historic site, and the Mills Act actually gives benefits to owners of historic properties, that tax benefits, tax breaks, when you do maintenance, et cetera. So this Mills Act actually may help you greatly. And I would encourage you to look at that, especially since we in West Hollywood pride ourselves on our historic sites and historic buildings and historic neighborhoods, and would love for you to be able to maintain that building without it affecting your future retirement. I also want to thank our Social Justice Task Force for all their work. Shannon Morton, losing my mind. Black Women Lead. I really appreciate you participating when I called you to ask if you would join the task force, and I so appreciate that you were involved in this effort. Giselle Washington, we worked for the same company at different years. I was much earlier, but it was so nice to meet you and to know that we had that experience in common. And again, thank you all for your participation in that. I have several announcements. The city is hosting a virtual workshop on Thursday, October 20th at 6:30 p.m. to discuss potential changes to Fountain Avenue, including new bike facilities and widened sidewalks. This is an opportunity for the city to hear feedback for an improved Fountain Avenue. An online survey is also available to provide written comment. For more information, please visit the city's calendar page at www.weho.org/calendar. The city's annual Youth Halloween Carnival celebration is taking place on October 22nd from 2 to 5 p.m. at Plummer Park. The event will include games, a pumpkin patch, costume showcases, and much, much more. For more information about the Youth Halloween Carnival, please visit the city's Recreation Services webpage at www.weho.org/community/recreation-services. We also, over the next few weeks, the city will be hosting community safety and well-being meetings with both an in-person and virtual option. The in-person meeting will be held on Tuesday, October 25th at 6 p.m., and the virtual meeting will take place on Thursday, November 3rd at 12 p.m. These meetings will provide an opportunity to learn more about the city's efforts in developing a community safety and well-being strategic plan, and provide an opportunity for the community to share perspectives and feedback on the initial strategies, priorities, and initiatives. For more information, please visit www.weho.org/CSWB. I have heard some concerns among residents about this process, and I would just suggest that that you contact Danny Rivas, the Director of Community Safety, to see if we can resolve those concerns. I did also want to mention, because we did move some items to consent, item 4A on the agreement for services with Perkins and Will on the Coast Playhouse facility. We received communications regarding concerns about the possibility of an outside performance space from the neighbors. And so I would appreciate if staff would reach out to those neighbors and make sure that they are involved in this process, and especially with regard to whatever outdoor use there is at that site. Regarding the Plummer Park pilot off-leash dog area design, did you have comments about that?
It's not on consent.
Oh, that's right, we didn't put it on consent. Sorry about that. We did, and then we didn't. Okay. And I believe that that is it for me, and now I will hand it over to our acting city manager, Oscar Delgado.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the City Council. I have some quick updates. The city will host a community forum on Proposition 1, abortion in California, tomorrow, Tuesday, October 18th at 7 p.m. in the City Council chambers. It will feature a moderated panel discussion about the California ballot proposition and state constitutional amendment that, if approved by voters in November, would establish a constitutional right to a reproductive freedom in California. The event is free and open to the public. It will be broadcast on Channel 10 and live streamed on various social media platforms. For more information, please visit the city's website at weho.org. This Thursday, the Great California Shakeout Earthquake Drill is happening at 10:20 a.m. The drill is an annual opportunity for people in homes, schools, businesses, and organizations to practice what they would do during an earthquake. Contact the city's community safety department at 323-848-6414 or via email at safety@weho.org for more information. With respect to the council member comments, Councilmember Horvath, we will be coming back in November based on the governor's decision to see what our impacts will be. So we have that coming back. With respect to Councilmember D'Amico, we will definitely bring an item back that kind of highlights the projects we're working on and also the capacity of staff to do them in a timely fashion. And Perkins and Will, there's for the mayor, Perkins and Will has a pretty robust outreach that's still going to happen, and we'll take that into consideration as well. And I got you. For Halloween, I'm going to call up our Director of Community Safety, Danny Rivas.
Thank you, Oscar. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the City Council. I'm Danny Rivas, Director of Community Safety for the City of West Hollywood. In regards to the Halloween Public Safety Plan, there is a plan that has been in the works, and it will definitely be in place. That will include an increased level of public safety personnel working from Friday, October 28th, through that entire weekend as well as Halloween itself. And this will be in anticipation, obviously, of the level of visitors expected to visit our community during Halloween weekend. This includes personnel from our West Hollywood Sheriff Station, Los Angeles County Fire Department, our Security Ambassador Program, as well as City Code Enforcement and other department staff involved in safeguarding the public and maintaining existing infrastructure, such as the removal of trash and pressure washing our sidewalks. Message boards will also be placed out a week in advance around the city, communicating no full or partial street closures will occur this year, but we'll also have barricades that will be installed on Halloween Day itself along the outer edges of traffic lanes on Santa Monica Boulevard within the Rainbow District. And this is intended to provide further distance, between pedestrians and vehicular traffic. And so it obviously will provide enhanced safety for pedestrians. In addition to that, we do have contingency plans that are also in place should an emergency situation occur that would necessitate any immediate need to close down the street. All public eating and public eating with alcohol businesses, so our restaurants and our nightlife, were also communicated earlier this month by our Community Safety Department in terms of providing them with information that there will be an increased presence of public safety personnel, and also making them aware and mindful of overcrowding issues, as well as overserving of patrons. And then lastly, I just want to also make mention that permit parking will remain in effect. However, there is available parking at the Pacific Design Center that is available until 12 a.m. And there is a flat rate that applies to folks that are wishing to park after 6 p.m. So that concludes my update, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
That concludes my report.
Oh, okay. And just very quickly, I neglected to just mention that the city and its Disabilities Advisory Board is hosting 2 special events in recognition of Disabilities Awareness Month. And Rick mentioned this, but he had to speak very quickly. This Thursday, October 20th, there will be a free vaccination clinic in coordination with Cedars-Sinai. Flu vaccines and COVID-19 vaccines, including the new booster, will be available. There will also be blood pressure screening, an opportunity to register to vote, and more. The event will take place at Plummer Park in the Great Hall courtyard between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. And then on Wednesday, October 26th at 6 p.m., the 24th Annual Disability Service Awards and televised meeting will be held on Zoom and will be live streamed. Awards will be presented in the categories of business, nonprofit, media, and individual. Councilmember Horvath, did you have an additional comment?
Yes, thank you. I neglected to mention 2 things. First, the city was recognized at the Aquatic and Recreation Center and Park project. We've been certified LEED Gold by the U.S. Building Council. Green Building Council, This recognition is a testament to our city's commitment to sustainability, and the LEED Gold certified plaque will be on display at the Aquatic Recreation Center. And I want to thank our staff, LPA, everyone who made this accomplishment possible for the city. I also want to give a shout out to Lyric Rouse Ringo, who you may recall, sang the Black National Anthem in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. Day in 2021. She recently appeared on the ABC network show Abbott Elementary. She's a young person aspiring to a very bright future in our entertainment industry. We just want to give our congratulations to her. And if the city staff requires a vote from the council with regard to the mayor's suggestion about collecting income information from all renters in the city, I would like to oppose that action. I don't think the city should be collecting that information from renters at this time.
Okay, so Madam City Clerk, what is the fiscal impact with the addition of items 4A, 5A, 6A, and 6B, item 2.08.030?
Thank you, Mayor. The fiscal impact on tonight's consent calendar with the addition of the items you mentioned is $8,994,548 in expenditures, $0 in revenues, and $40,545 in waived fees. Prior to the approval of the consent calendar, I do need to read the titles of the two ordinances for items 6A and 6B that were moved to consent. For item 6A, an ordinance of the City of West Hollywood amending Title 17 of the West Hollywood Municipal Code relating to a repeal of the freeze on rent increases, limit on the annual general adjustment, bad faith rent increases, and the exemption of no-cost interim or transitional housing for people experiencing homelessness. And for item 6B, Section 1 of this ordinance is being introduced on first reading only. Section 2 has been tabled, and that ordinance is an ordinance of the City of West Hollywood amending portions of Title 2, Article 1, Section 2.08 of the West Hollywood Municipal Code. And with that, we will have a motion on the consent calendar.
We had a motion.
And it disappeared.
Councilmember D'Amico, seconded by Councilmember Erickson. Okay. Consent calendar passes. And now we do not have any public hearings this evening, so we go right to unfinished business. And we are going to item 4B. And that is replacement of above lower income units in new housing projects. And we have our planning staff here with us tonight in person.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and council members, and Mayor Pro Tem and council members. I'm John Kehoe, Director of Planning and Development Services for the city. So I'm here with Allison Bartle of our Economic Development Department, and we are going to be talking about housing policy related to demolition of rent-stabilized units when those buildings are replaced with new construction. Under SB 330, a law that was passed several years ago, new housing projects must include the replacement of units demolished so that there's no net loss of units. In addition, the law allows cities like West Hollywood that have rent stabilization rules to choose how we want some of those units to be replaced. Those units could be returned as rent stabilized or as deed restricted affordable units. As part of our development review process, an applicant is required to provide us income levels of the tenants in the buildings, including those with incomes that are above lower income, so all incomes in the buildings. All units occupied by lower income households must come back as deed restricted affordable housing. So low income units come back as deed restricted affordable. So that's required. So the discussion tonight is what happens to the units that were occupied by tenants that were above lower income households. So the law allows the cities to choose how those units come back as either rent stabilized, which would be status quo. They're rent stabilized in existing buildings, and we could choose that they come back as rent stabilized in a new building. Or the city could also choose to make them deed restricted affordable, meaning that they would be permanently restricted to folks of lower income levels. Since the law went into effect, the city has been implementing the law through the status quo of having the units come back as rent stabilized units. So that's how we've been handling that. While we haven't kept track of the number of buildings per se that have come through that process, we believe about 5 or 6 buildings have been approved using this process. At a recent Planning Commission meeting, there was considerable discussion about when the city needs to tell a developer how those units are going to come back, whether they're going to come back as rent stabilized or come back as deed restricted affordable. So there's a lot of discussion about that and Commission wanting to have clarity. So we're bringing the item to the council so the council can look at that policy item and give us clear direction. And that way we can go back to all the developers when they come in the future and have clear direction of what the council would like to see. Staff is proposing a policy to address this issue, and the policy that we're looking at would require that all the housing that we're talking about would come back as deed-restricted affordable housing. The purpose for that is we have heard the City Council talk about how can the city actually get affordable units built in the city to comply with our RENA requirements. So by requiring those units to come back as deed-restricted affordable would achieve some of those goals. So that's the initial proposal that we're providing the City Council as far as our policy goes. We do have some concerns, however, that there might be some unintended consequences of that, and that some projects may not move forward if too many of those units are deed restricted affordable. So in essence, if the project becomes 40, 50, 60% deed restricted affordable, maybe the developer will choose not to do that project. So the concern with that is, well, then that might result in fewer projects and fewer overall units, and then we're not meeting our RENA numbers across the board. So both are issues that we need to take into consideration. And so what we're proposing tonight is we implement a policy immediately that would require the deed-restricted affordable units. And then the city, if the council approves it, would authorize us to contract with an economic consultant. So we could do an analysis to see whether or not there is any unintended consequences of going with deed-restricted affordable. You know, possibly there might be some solution where it's in between. Maybe the state will come back and say there are no impacts of this policy. So that's the route we would like to go with our recommendation. And like I said, I'm here with Allison, and she can answer any specific questions you might have.
I have a couple of questions. When you say that the units that were the above income, above the lower income level, and you say that they were rent stabilized, were they rent stabilized starting at the starting point when the tenant left, or rent stabilized from the point of whatever the market rate is now?
Whatever it is at now.
Now, so in other words, if it was a $1,500 a month unit before people were Ellised out, that's not the rent that it's starting point at the rent stabilized, as a rent stabilized unit in the new project. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And John, didn't the Planning Commission, was it in 2019, voted unanimously to go with affordable, with the affordable option that they should be deed restricted affordable units?
Yes, the Planning Commission did discuss it. It was part of a larger zone text amendment that had a lot of items related to state laws. This was not the principal point of conversation in that meeting, but they did vote to support affordable housing.
Yeah, but they did have a discussion about it.
It was included in the overall discussion of zone text amendments, yes.
Okay, and then would you say that another consequence, or actually a benefit, would be that there might be fewer displaced tenants with this? I mean, you talked about that there might be fewer projects, but there also might be fewer displaced tenants, isn't that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other questions from, or do we want to go to public?
Thank you.
Councilmember.
You had suggested that you would like to have staff do a study to evaluate potential impacts with regard to whatever direction we go. Why would we not, if that study can be done quickly, why would we not do that study before we make a policy change?
Well, I think it's important that we provide clear direction now to developers who are about to make applications. And so we want to make sure that we get clear direction from the City Council now so we can tell everybody ahead of time. So that's why we want to do the policy, because it can go into effect immediately upon the City Council action. So that gives that direction immediately. It will take us some time to do the study. It might take 6 months, might take a little bit longer. We don't know exactly how long it will take. And so we just want to make sure that there's a policy in effect during that time period.
So, but we do have a policy in effect, right? I mean, that we're already replacing units with rent stabilized units. That's the practical application of the policy as it exists right now.
Yes, it's a policy, but it's not a policy that the council has officially weighed in on. So if the council wants to weigh in on it and state that that's the policy, that would be fine too.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions at this time? Okay. Let's go to public comment. Stephanie Harker, to be followed by Ed Levin.
Stephanie Harker, City of West Hollywood. I'm just a little confused as why this has taken 6 years, or why we as a city have been dragging our feet on having a one-for-one replacement for rent-stabilized units in buildings that have been demolished and a new project's been going up. I guess the most egregious example of that was the Center for Early Education, when I believe 16 units were lost of rent-stabilized or affordable housing, and they made a larger playground for the kids. Love kids, need a larger playground, but we lost our rent-stabilized units. There's been other examples of this, and this all started in 2016, I believe. It's been amended a few times, so I'm not sure why we haven't implemented this in a more expeditious fashion. We need housing units. We're going to need 4,000 of them in the next 8 years, although I'm not sure that's possible. But if we could avoid the cost of a study of this yet again, when we should have been able to do this over the last 6 years and should have been doing this in some of the projects that are being built or have been built, we need more units. And I believe the section of whether it should be only low income, no, everyone's losing their home, and then we have to find a place for those people to go while they're building these where the original ones were demolished. So let's put our pedal to the metal on this and start the one-for-one. If that doesn't interest the developers, then they'll have to build somewhere else. Thank you.
Ed Levin, to be followed by Steve Martin.
Thank you, Mayor, members of Council. Edward Levin, resident of West Hollywood. Approve first, ask questions later is a really bad way to make major housing policy, and this is major housing policy we're talking about. We're not talking about replacing rent-stabilized units with rent-stabilized units. We're talking about replacing market rate units with affordable units, deed-restricted affordable units. Now, the mayor's quite right. This will make many redevelopment projects economically infeasible. So yes, we'll have less tenant displacement because we'll have less development projects. But we have no idea how this is going to affect our RENA numbers. No idea. We haven't studied this. We know there'll be an impact. We know that we'll get fewer development projects, but we don't know what effect this will have on RENA. There's never been a public discussion of this. Planning Commission didn't discuss this with any kind of context 2 years ago. They didn't look at this question. They didn't have any figures. They didn't study it. Now, on 5 days' notice, this has come out as a policy. We have no public input on this. The public doesn't really understand what this is. Ms. Harker, with all due respect, doesn't understand this. It's not about it's about making market rate units into affordable ones, not simply rent stabilized. Yes, make the policy right now to require rent-stabilized apartments, make it the official policy. It's what we do now, but let's study this because we don't know what the impacts will be. Approve the study. Let's come back with a real public process when we know what we're talking about here. We don't understand the impacts, And if you don't understand the impacts, we can't discuss it intelligently. Why are we doing this? Why are we rushing this through just before an election? Let's take this time to study it and know what the policy ought to be. Thank you.
Steve Martin, to be followed by Eric Matos.
Steve Martin, West Hollywood. I agree with what Stephanie Harker said. This has been a long time coming, too long. And I think when we're, as policymakers, we need to do a Hippocratic oath to indicate that we're going to do the least amount of harm to West Hollywood residents. And that's where this comes in. People who are living in rent-controlled apartments have consistently stated their concern about being displaced by development. That's often inevitable, but if this, for some reason, interferes with development and slows it down, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means that we keep low-income people and working-class people in their rent-controlled apartments a little longer. This isn't going to stop all development. Eventually, things will pan out. I mean, this may not even be a road bump to development. I think what we need to do is to adopt what's being proposed. We want to keep as many units deed restricted as possible. I do think there's reason to collect information about income simply to make it legally defensible. But I think there's a compromise between what Mayor Meister's proposing and what Councilmember Horvath's proposing, and maybe we only collect information from people who've been tenants for 10 or 15 years, or units that are $1,500 a month and lower, so that we're not casting a wider net. I'm not sure, but I think that could be part of a wider discussion. But I really think that it doesn't have anything to do with politics, because if it did, there would be a lot of other candidates here talking about it. I just think this is good policy that we need to wrap up. Thank you.
Eric Matos, do you have a question, Councilmember D'Amico?
No.
Okay.
I have a little toy on my microphone that I like to spin.
Good evening, Council. My name is Eric Matos. I'm a resident of West Hollywood in the WeHo Heights neighborhood. I wanted to come before you today just to speak to the item a little bit. I do think that there is council weigh-in needed on this item. Obviously, as a city, we're committed to maintaining the affordable units and rent-stabilized units that we have available to us. But I do think that the study is needed to continue on with this item. But we do also, at the same time, need some guidance right now as a city on how to move forward with this. I did want to speak to one of the alternatives just a little bit. Alternative 1 looked at a cap of what percentage of affordable deed-restricted units could be assigned to each project. I would just say that as a city, we should be looking at multiple different income levels for housing, also moderate and middle income, median income units as well, so that we're looking at not just one section of housing, but also the whole abundant section of housing, every single different category. So thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Thank you, Eric. Victor Omolchenko.
The time is now for you to act on this. Over the last decade, we've lost over 1,000 rent-stabilized units of housing. Broadly speaking, what did the developers give us back? 20% of that number in 200 affordable units, but 800 were permanently lost in a city that we keep being reminded of by you here on the dais as being 80% renters. That's a lot of renters, that's a lot of voters, and it's time to move on this item now. You know, it was Senate Bill 330 that was passed, and then there was Assembly Bill 2556 that became effective in January of 2017. The city has been dragging its feet on all the replacement provisions of this state bill long enough. Rents are skyrocketing. We must protect the existing rental housing that we have. It's time to fully implement this replacement to the fullest extent possible. We're given this option by the state. This bugaboo of the RHNA numbers, let's have a big community discussion and analysis about that. Have we ever been punished for not having that? And Councilmember Erickson, thank you. I have saved the literature. I thank Steve Martin for talking about the issue. I thank Lauren Meister for bringing up the issue. I was left a note by Chelsea Byers. Hi, Vic. Hi, Victor. I know you're on Ciclavia. She talks about renters and protecting the housing. Where are you, Chelsea Byers? Where are you? Who will stand up for renters? Robert Oliver. Where's Robert Oliver? Come on, candidates, start speaking up and let us know how you are going to vote on these issues that really affect us instead of giving us platitudes. And the renters in this city have been working for years to get the council to implement this, and the time is now and not for further expensive studies.
Victor.
Thank you for listening to me.
Madam City Clerk, you have some, do you have any Zoom callers? No?
We do not.
Okay, do we have any citizen position slips?
Yes, Mayor, we have one citizen position slip from Judson Fetter in support of the item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any additional questions?
Oh, sorry, no.
No, you.
Councilmember Erickson, followed by Councilmember D'Amico.
Someone who just spoke brought up RHNA. And so I wanted to talk about some of the issues that we're kind of facing here at the moment, because the city doesn't have a compliant housing element as of yet. But if you've been following the news regarding Santa Monica, they are being forced to build things that their community may or may not have wanted, correct? So can you walk us through what are some of the consequences? And I know I'm kind of getting a slightly off topic here regarding the housing element, but I do think it plays into effect here when people are talking about the need to build housing. So in terms of this item, you said it could potentially impact long-term development options to build the housing numbers regardless, because RHNA says you need to build housing at different levels, right?
Correct.
Correct. What are some of the options that are being utilized by individuals, like in the city of Santa Monica right now, by, say, cities preventing housing from occurring by maybe adopting policies like this or not? What builders, I guess I should have told you, I was going to quiz you on state housing law at the moment beforehand, so I apologize. But because of a non-compliant housing element, the builder's law exception, I believe, is being utilized in Santa Monica.
That's what we understand from reading some articles. We haven't really gotten into that much in depth regarding what's happening in Santa Monica. I just read it today myself.
Yeah, so when those things occur, all power is taken away from local cities to say anything about how housing is built or how units are allocated in many ways, correct?
Well, in that particular instance, in that way, yes.
Does the city have a compliant housing element as of 7:53 tonight?
The housing element has not been adopted. The housing element is up at the state being reviewed. So I know that the state changed some laws that give us a little bit more time to do it, but the current housing element cycle, we have not received an adopted housing element yet.
But what could be potentially adopted tonight could harm, per the staff report, future development options in the city of West Hollywood to build housing.
That's a concern we have. We don't have the information that says it will or will not. It's just a concern that we have that we want to analyze.
Great. And so, but anyone right now at this time could come into the city and use the statewide exception for us not having a statewide compliant housing element and build housing to whatever standard they would want to at the moment, correct?
I am not sure about that, and I'm not sure if our city attorney has
Do you
an
want
answer
to
on that.
answer that question?
I think the builder's remedy is available in some limited circumstances. It's not for every type of project in every circumstance. It doesn't completely invalidate the entire zoning ordinance, but there could be some circumstances like Santa Monica is facing where a particular project of a certain size with a certain percentage of affordability might move forward while they wait for their housing element to be certified.
Is the city at risk at that right now?
Perhaps. We haven't seen any requests for it or any applications for those types of projects. Like John said, he just heard about the Santa Monica situation today in a news article. But the state is reviewing our housing element as we speak. It was submitted in early September, so that process is moving forward as quickly as possible.
Would this item, if passed in its form with, let's say, making it deed restricted in those ways, with the concerns not being addressed by you, would that be seen as another hindrance to a compliant housing element that we submitted when our housing element recommendations were to build as much housing as possible?
I'm not sure if it would, because it would be mandating more affordable, permanent, deed restricted affordable, which is clearly something that the state wants us to do. So it helps us get towards meeting those RHNA numbers of affordable units.
But we are mandated also to do other levels of affordable housing, which could cause that harm in this area.
Yeah, and just one other thing of note, I think it's program 12 in our housing element discusses replacement housing and preservation. And so, again, it's a balancing act, and this is really a policy direction to weigh the two options, right? We have a goal to preserve, and we also have a goal to build. And so we're trying to find that right balance, and that's what's before you tonight.
Thank you.
Councilmember D'Amico.
I was going to ask I'll ask both questions. So when we spoke, you said that the affordable units, at least according to the law that we're discussing, can be low or very low, and we don't have an option to include moderate in that list of possible affordable units. That's correct?
So the replacement units are low and very low, and then if it's a rent stabilized unit, the law says that they must be replaced by a lower income unit for 55 years. So lower would mean low and very low in the state law. Those are the two policy options. We had talked about a third way, which is alternative one, and what you and I had discussed, that we could have discussions potentially with the state and review it, but we believe there's a potential third way that might include, I know there's been discussion of workforce and moderate and some other path. But, SB 330 and 65915, the replacement law specifically states either rent stabilized replacement or lower income replacement.
Right. And so I guess just to pick up on the question about whether we have a housing element or not, if someone's going to use that against us, they're going to use it to get out of building 2 affordable units the same way they would to get out of building 7 or 9 or 14. I mean, if they don't want to build them, they'll find a way to not do it. I can't, unless you're recommending we do that, I can't sort of base a good policy decision on a possible
I think one thing that
attack from the outside.
Right. One thing we haven't talked about tonight, but my understanding of builder's remedy is 2 big components to be eligible are the project must be at least 20% lower income or 100% affordable. And so, again, the projects that are moving forward in Santa Monica, on my brief reading, are also proposing a pretty significant amount of affordable within them to be eligible. And again, John and we are also coming up to speed on whatever's happening in Santa Monica, but it would seem that this is going to be not 100% market rate luxury 10-story condo building that gets to, they have to meet certain minimums in order to qualify for builder's remedy.
Okay. And when we discussed this, I think I said I was kind of falling in a place somewhere near 50% of the units would be affordable and not less than the 20 that's required, the 20% of our already existing ordinance. So in fact, if a duplex is taken out of the housing stock and 20 units are built, we would still want to have 4 new units, which would be 20% versus 50% of the duplex, which would be 1. But if the opposite happens, if a 10-unit building is taken out of service and 20 are built, we wouldn't want 4 units, we would want 5, plus the 5 rent stabilized. So it's kind of a version of the recommendation 1, but I think it in some way it strategizes around sort of a couple of things that we're looking at, which is that there are in fact probably some people who wouldn't build units, and there are in fact reasons to help our RENA numbers. But I also want to say to my colleagues that I'm not 100% against moving forward with the staff's recommendation, but I think if we're going to take steps towards a final policy, one step in the right direction versus a leap and a step back is different than a first step and then a second step if what we find out is there is reason to make them all 6 months or 9 months from now. But again, this is the beginning of the discussion. I'm happy to hear my colleagues have to say.
So I have a question. On the above lower income units, are you saying that affordable moderate is not allowed?
So the above moderate units, when they're replaced, state law says 2 options. 1, they can come back as rent stabilized.
Right.
2, they can come back as deed restricted to lower income for 55 years. And lower would mean very low or low. And the incomes would be what's outlined in the HCD income chart. So they wouldn't be coming back as moderate income. They'd be coming back as low or very low.
Moderate affordable. You're saying it doesn't come back as moderate affordable.
No, not per state law. Again, I mean, you could, I think, yeah, not per state law, looking at the city attorney.
City attorney?
The state law is pretty clear. It's rent stabilized or low. That's the city's choice for this category of replacement units.
Okay. So I have a different take. As you know, I've been following this since the Planning Commission unanimously voted to recommend that all of the units be affordable. And they voted unanimously because affordable units are affordable. Rent-stabilized units starting at today's market rate prices are not affordable. I don't believe that we need an analysis. The state has consistently put laws in place to make it easier for housing developers to build more housing, especially multifamily rental housing, to help solve the housing crisis. However, after seeing people displaced from existing housing units that were affordable, state legislators finally wrote a code that protects existing rental housing by requiring developers to replace existing housing that is demolished 1 for 1. And in this same code, they give even greater discretion to rent-controlled jurisdictions like ours to protect existing rent-stabilized rental housing. And this was done because they understand that existing housing is less expensive to rent than new housing. So it's absurd to think that with the overwhelming advantages that the state has given developers, that they didn't craft this code fully realizing and intending for the replacement requirements to, in certain cases, disincentivize some new development, where that new development causes the loss of existing housing that is already affordable. We don't need to analyze this to see if it disincentivizes some developments. It will. But I believe that was the state's purpose to protect existing rent-stabilized housing that is affordable so that renters paying affordable rents can stay in their homes. For staff to assert that by doing this we will not reach our RENA numbers is disingenuous. The new developments we've seen are not providing 62% affordable units, which is what RENA requires. In fact, they're not even providing the 20% inclusionary units that we used to achieve before the state got involved in our land use policies. We're lucky to see 15 to 17% of these new units be affordable. So if staff is planning to reach our RENA numbers by tearing down existing housing that is already affordable and putting up luxury units, then I believe that staff is moving in the wrong direction, especially when in our housing element, we talk about protecting our existing rent-stabilized units. So instead of doing a study and wasting money to find out something we already know, why doesn't staff recommend to do a study to figure out how we can help our small mom and pop apartment building owners to maintain and upgrade their buildings and keep our residents currently living in rental units that are affordable housed? I also think that staff has to provide set guidelines, which is why we're here today, about how the number of above low-income units is calculated and how those above low-income units will be allocated so that developers can make informed decisions. Planning staff must also inform developers of what information they must gather and how. Staff should require a detailed explanation from developers of steps taken to contact current or prior occupants and reported for each unit. No application should be deemed complete until units to be replaced have been designated as low income or above low income. And that's why I suggested that the Rent Stabilization and Housing Department make every attempt to get this information as they register units so we don't have to depend on the developer to provide it. However, in the case that the information can't be extracted from the unit registration information, then staff should design the form for developers to send to known, current, or prior occupants, explaining the importance of fully completing and returning the form to the city. Planning Commission must be provided with all the details as to the existing units. The staff report should contain how each existing unit was accounted for in final calculations. It's absurd that this information has been excluded from staff reports. So I would just say that allowing any of the one-for-one replacements to be rent stabilized rather than affordable is not providing affordable housing. Rent stabilizing a new unit that is going to start out at $3,500 a month is not affordable. If we are a city that provides affordable housing, then we must use this tool that the state has provided to us to designate all one-for-one replacements as affordable units. If it doesn't pencil out for a developer, then they just find another property that does. Let's do what we say we wanted to do. 1, protect our residents in rent-stabilized buildings, and 2, create the types of housing we need. That is, units that are affordable. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I have a question. So on page 7, the example in the staff report, previous RSO units on project site is 14. And under what we're doing currently, which was alternative 2 at the 20%, what would happen if 33 units are built? 19 would be market, 5 would be affordable, 9 would be rent stabilized. Is that right?
Yep. Yes.
So what will happen to the 14 RSO units? 9 are rent stabilized, 5 are affordable.
Yes.
Okay. So what we decide tonight is really just temporary because your recommendation is to do a study that will then guide the Planning Commission. It's going to go to the Planning Commission for a full, thorough input, correct?
Yes, so we hope we get a policy direction out of council tonight, so we can have the policy now. And then we need to update our zoning ordinance to make sure it's codified in our ordinance, and so that would go to the Planning Commission. And we would also hope that we get the direction to do the analysis, and that would go simultaneously to the Planning Commission, so they'd have both the study and the zone text amendment to look at simultaneously.
And then it would come back to council again?
Correct.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm not happy with what is in existence now. I don't think it creates enough affordable units. And quite frankly, we need to build more. I think we do need an analysis, and it does need a thorough look by the Planning Commission, because we need to build more. I'm not a proponent of let's just stop development, but I do want us to build as many affordable units as possible. One of the issues I see with potentially the recommendation is if we're going to make 14 affordable units for low income, very low income, that is great, but then it leaves out the moderate income levels, and that's something we need to take into account. I'm leaning towards alternative one. I think it's a good compromise for a policy right now, but also the analysis should really be alternative one, in my opinion, and the recommendation that staff has, as well as perhaps what we can do in addition to this to incentivize building more, which sometimes means building higher. So we can build more affordable and perhaps more moderate income and more housing in general. I know the state has done a lot for density, but as a city, if we're going to be honest about not displacing tenants, as well as creating more housing, we're going to have to build up, and that's just a reality. So I think alternative one is where I'm leaning, because it is a good compromise between the two, and doing the analysis, it should happen very quickly and not dragging out a whole year. If you say it can be done in 6 months, do it in 6 months, go to planning, come back. The new council will then be able to really give their input. We are going to have an election, but this gives us a lot more than what we have, and with an eye towards potentially the recommendation and maybe something that will let us do even more in just building more. I don't really care about RENA. I care about the fact that I know at least 3 women, queer women of color, that cannot afford to live here anymore, and we keep losing more people. So it is a balancing act of building more and making sure that we build as much affordable as possible and across the board. Councilmember D'Amico, I'm not really sure. I didn't understand really what you were intending as far as your idea about the 50%. I would love to, and maybe if staff understands, that can be taken into account in this analysis, but I didn't understand what you were saying. So if you could maybe clear that up. That's where I am right now, and I know Councilmember Horvath, I think, has not spoken yet either. So,
Councilmember D'Amico.
I have a question about the moderate income units that currently come in our 20%. That's an ordinance fully within the city of West Hollywood, right?
That's correct.
So if in projects like this, we stated that the first 20% of units were moderate, and then the rest were low or very low per the state's requirements, is that a calculation we could could do in order to find ourselves again making moderate income units?
I might jump in and answer that for just a moment because we've received some recent input from HCD on applying moderate unit requirements in cities with inclusionary ordinances, and it's gotten a lot more complicated as the years go by and as the density bonus ordinance has changed. So I think the moderate unit requirement is something that's going to come to you all in short time to have a policy discussion about that as well, as long as all the housing element implementation ordinances. So I think there is going to be a lot of housing policy conversation coming in the next year, and that's going to be one of the topics. But I don't think it's something we can do as part of this policy tonight.
Okay. And to answer the Mayor Pro Tem's question, my suggestion was somewhere between alternate 1 and alternate 2, because in alternate 2, the percentages are of the total number, and I was looking at the percentages of the lost number. But again, as I said, I think alternate 1 is also a good step and a good version of getting to the actual goal, which I think has to be the total number of units. And as the mayor said, you know, right-sizing the problem for the developer, that's slightly different way of saying disincentivizing. But right now, the problem is always the tenants. The developer buys the unit and moves them out. This way, it makes more of the problem the developers. And I know they have a lot of problems. Developing isn't easy. But I think I do think protecting our rent-stabilized units, especially as we are making them earthquake-proof, and then I believe, John, right, we're getting a sort of resiliency and sustainability ordinance coming forward about insulating and changing the windows. And so if we're really preparing our housing stock for the next 50 years, right-sizing the problem around whether it disappears or not from a development standpoint, I think is important.
Councilmember Horvath?
Thank you. At our last meeting, at this meeting, we've had attacks on our staff, and I think that it is completely within our right to criticize, discuss what staff proposes, but to suggest that staff is being disingenuous on a policy proposal that's coming forward when we know there hasn't been a policy study on this item. What is being proposed tonight was not discussed during the process of our housing element, for which we are still seeking approval. I think it is absolutely incorrect and inappropriate for us to accuse staff of being disingenuous. I think what we need to help support them in advancing a policy that we can all believe in is making sure that it is properly researched and founded in the studies that are required to move proper policy forward. Our staff is our partner in developing policy, and I just want to say that because I think I've seen now in several meetings where we are attacking staff when I think that staff is trying to be our partner in solving the problems that we're identifying and trying to develop solutions for. Additionally, what I haven't heard anyone acknowledge tonight when we're talking about whether units are covenanted as permanent affordable versus rent stabilized is that there is no protection if the renters make more in their income than the amounts that are designated for which they would qualify for these affordable units. So we might have renters who make more money than the amount that is allowed for an income qualified unit. So those people would still be displaced. And I understand that we are dealing with the reality of newly constructed market rate units are very expensive. And the hope is that we build enough so that a rent stabilized policy for that new housing stock would make them affordable in some ongoing basis. but to not really have a full understanding or analysis to inform this policy discussion, I think is absolutely putting the cart before the horse and punishing the people that we asked to bring forward a policy, to bring forward a solution. We are seeking a policy decision tonight, as I hear, because our Planning Commission wants direction from this council for a short period of time. And I understand that. So I don't think we should be making any sort of extreme policy jump if we don't understand the implications, especially for not committing to doing the policy study within 6 months. So I would prefer that we go with the option that allows units to be designated rent stabilized, and then move in the direction of increasing the percentage that's designated affordable once we understand what the impact is on the overall housing stock, because we need to create all types of housing in order to address the housing crisis that exists for all types of housing in our community and in the region. I think that additionally, what really motivated this discussion isn't necessarily even anything that we've discussed tonight, but frustrations with specific projects that came forward and backroom dealings in discussions regarding projects that certain people who have leadership power in this city didn't like. And that, again, is not what we want to be doing, especially in light of what the recent news headlines revealed about backroom dealings in our neighboring city. I don't want one elected official having a voice on this policy with staff behind the scenes when all of us can have this conversation in public. This conversation needs to be happening with all 5 council members and with all planning commissioners in open forums, not with pressure behind the scenes on our staff to bring forward policy proposals that were not fully vetted by our planning commission and that are the agenda of a select number or even one individual elected official. We should be having these conversations in this kind of room together as a community. And I think that this conversation should be happening with a study that informs how we make this decision, rather than just pulling numbers out of thin air and determining that that's how we want to proceed. We don't even have an approved housing element at this point. So I think that what Councilmember D'Amico indicated is absolutely correct. We need to codify policy, especially at the request of the Planning Commission, and I would like to see us take these steps incrementally rather than making big leaps that are not made based on information that we have, and then have to reverse course because we've overcorrected for a problem that is actually creating more problems going forward.
Okay, I assume someone's going to want to make a motion, but before you do, I'm just going to say that for 3 years, ever since the Planning Commission recommended that we go with all affordable units for one-for-one replacement, I have been asking staff when this item is going to be coming to council. The backroom dealings that Councilmember Horvath is talking about is a request to review a project that I was considering bringing to this council, and had a discussion with the city attorney, as I am allowed, to decide whether I wanted to bring that review to this council. And we had decided that it was not a good idea because of SB 330, which basically says a developer needs to know upfront what is expected of them. And that is why that review request did not happen. But that also is probably why this was finally brought to council after 3 years of asking for this after the Planning Commission recommendation. Councilmember D'Amico has made a request for a motion.
Yeah, I would.
Motion?
What's my motion?
To a motion.
So first of all, thank you to the staff and to the public here and who wrote to all of us, or maybe just me, but I'm pretty sure it was all of us, came in the city's correspondence. I think we should move forward with this recommendation, and we should adopt alternate 1. I mean, I think that that is an incremental step. It does begin to shift the question of how we work towards keeping more of our rent-stabilized units front and center in the discussion of development. I realize that part of this motion is also to approve a study, and I do think that the study should also go forward, and certainly you now have a list of people who have interest, and certainly more will come forward as the study progresses. So that's my motion, and I see there's a second.
There's
Is
a
there
second.
anything you'd like to add, Mayor Pro Tem, to that motion?
No, that's great.
Okay. I've called the question.
May I say one thing? There's a resolution in the packet, so I just want to read the language that you're going to add to the resolution before you adopt the motion. So at the end of section 1 in the resolution, it talks about the replacement units to be deed restricted lower income affordable units in the new project. And in the staff report, there's language describing alternative 1 that I will add to the end of that sentence that says, if the deed restricted units would result in not more than 35% of the total units in the project being deed restricted, any other replacement units would then be subject to rent stabilization requirements. That's alternative 1.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And the motion passes 4-1. Okay, we're going to move on now to item 4C, Plummer Park Pilot Off-Leash Dog Area Design. Is staff here with us today? Yep.
Need a big presentation. I don't think we need a presentation at all.
Okay. But we still need sound.
Oh, yeah, we do.
And I don't believe we need a presentation. Do we need a presentation? Anybody?
No.
Okay. I think there are just some questions before we move forward with this. Okay. But we do have some public speakers, so do we have a public speaker for this item? Stephanie Harker.
Stephanie Harker, City of West Hollywood. I just wanted to say yippee. Yay for the doggies. But I hope when this does go in that we can start to enforce the off-leash dog rules, because from about 4:30 till about 7 o'clock, it is like herds of dogs running around. They're pretty cute, but again, there are a lot of people who are afraid of dogs still. Don't know how that could be, but it's true. And some of them get into fight. They're all off leash right now, but it's all out in the middle of the lawn. So if we could really enforce that, and also along those same lines, if we can somehow, I don't care if you have to do undercover or what, but people do not pick up after their dogs. So maybe they will in the off-leash area, but they are not. I have a neighbor lives on Fountain and Fuller, and she said it's been pretty bad lately. And the dogs were recently joined by a jogger who thought it was a good idea as well, so which she has on her Ring camera. Anyway, I'm so happy this is finally taking place. There's a lot of people in the park with the doggies, and it's kind of a little group of friends who get together. So onward, and maybe the temporary can work out. I do understand there were some concerns about whether it should be chips or the grass, but I think that was discussed. So thank you, and we're finally happy to have it after all these years. Bye.
Thank you, Stephanie Harker. Any other people? Okay. So why don't we start with Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, so I'm not sure this is a question, because the Public Facilities Commission did recommend having turf, and I think we need to go with turf. I understand that you're all thinking this is temporary. I don't know what the price difference is, but It's my understanding we're actually replacing wood chips in another park with turf as well. So for me, we just need to do turf. Wood chips, we had the Public Facilities Commission give a very definite guidance, and so I know it was provided as an amendment, and so that's really what I wanted to give direction on. Let's just spend the money on putting in turf.
Councilmember D'Amico?
I don't disagree. I guess I'm looking to people who have a longer future here. I mean, what is the likelihood a dog park in Plummer Park won't be well loved and oversubscribed? Exactly. I mean, I guess that's what of course I understand process, and it's another project for your list, Oscar. How is going to management? How are we going to get that done? But I think, yeah. So I don't disagree if there's the will. I know the dog parks we have here and the one we have up near Sunset, they just become beloved, and people go there every day, day after day. Yeah. So if we're making that decision, then that's the decision we're making, and we're basically making a decision that there's going to be a permanent, that now the rest of the park will be designed around, Great Hall, Long Hall, and the dog park, and everything else can come or go in some way. Okay.
Yeah, I guess my understanding was that it may not be the permanent location depending on how the pilot goes. What is the price difference, Helen, between the wood chip and believe me, I'm not a fan of wood chip, but what is the price difference?
And I'm just ballparking. It would probably be 30 to 40,000 more for design, because we'd have to look at drainage and all the other things that go along with that process, and then probably 200,000 to 300,000 more, depending. And of course, I'm really ballparking it for the actual turf installation and the drainage system. We have lessons learned from this park here on the drainage system, and we definitely would want to improve on what we did here. So I would say probably an additional 200,000 to 300,000 plus an additional, so about up to 340,000 additional to what we've currently asked for this evening.
And then we may also want to consider some sort of shade structure, because I think direct sunlight is very difficult for the dogs in exposed turf. So I think there would be additional costs for that as well.
And that would probably be in the $120,000 to $200,000 range for that, depending on what type of shades we would put in. So at the end of the day, we're looking at $700,000 to $800,000 all in for permanent dog park at that location. And again, these are ballparks. Right now, it's very difficult to predict because of the market is just constantly changing. But that would be a ballpark.
I guess my question would be, or comment would be, we need to think about how long it is going to take to get through a new master plan process for the park, or the community outreach, et cetera. So if it's going to take 3, 4, 5 years, it may be worth doing the turf, because that we know that it doesn't last forever, and at some point it would have to be replaced anyway. If we were just talking about a 3-month pilot or a 6-month pilot, then I can understand the concern about what we would be spending. So I would suggest then that we look at this as a longer-term commitment of several years, at least 3 years, and I think that would obviously be the case anyway. I don't think anything's going to be happening at that park before 3 to 5 years. So in that case, I would be supportive of Mayor Pro Tem's wish list for the turf and whatever shading we would need, because I know that turf does get hot. I have it in my backyard.
It does. It probably gets about 20 degrees hotter than natural grass, yes.
Yeah. Councilmember Erickson?
What's the time difference too? So I remember, Helen, we spoke about this, that if we go from wood chips, it's my horrible recollection of our phone conversation when I was rushing you off the phone. Apologies. But you said, I feel so bad. But you said it was like 6 months maybe for the wood chips, but for the AstroTurf, we would be looking at a whole year before we would even get this installed then, right?
Possibly about a year, depending on how long design takes and then finally installation and engineering. Because, like I said, the drainage is going to be a big one. So I would say a year, possibly, depending. I mean, we could fast track it, and you maybe you're looking at 9 months.
I want to thank the Public Facilities Commission and all the members of the public. And, as someone, we all love this park. So, I agree with the mayor, and I think what Mayor Pro Tem Shine said. I can't remember who's talking about it, but I do think this is a long-term investment. I think any community visioning for Plummer Park will be very extensive and very involved, and I think that's going to be, many years, which is okay. You have some time, Oscar, or David, but I'm fine with the cost. I was just worried about the time, which is why I thought this was a thing, because I think the community wants it. I'm there once a month on Saturdays, and people keep talking about the dog park. I text you a lot saying, when is it again? And you tell me the same answer. So if it could be fast-tracked, it would be great. I think it's overdue. Then I think to what Ms. Harker was saying, with dogs, running around off leash. Obviously, we want our four-legged friends to have fun, but to be safe at the same time. So I think this is one way we're doing it. So I'm fine with that recommendation, and if we could just add the language to make it as quickly as possible. But of course, doing it right is the important thing first.
Do you want to make any other comments? Do you want to make a motion?
Okay. Yes, so the motion is to fast track this, put in turf with whatever drainage design needs to happen, as well as shading, which we learned that we needed over here in our dog parks here in WeHo Park.
So put in a couple of trees.
I think there was one tree being put in, maybe.
So just a point of clarification on the budget. So would it be more feasible for us to move forward with the design, and then when we go out to bid for construction, then come back for the funding for the whole project? Or would you recommend that because right now I'm giving you huge ballparks.
Yes,
so,
that makes sense.
Yes, so we would probably look at needing about $100,000 for the design up front. And that's ballparking, and what we don't use we can put towards the project. And then when we get ready to go out to award for construction, then we could come back with an award at the same time and ask for the funding at that time.
Mm-hmm. Does that work for you, Oscar?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Can we get a roll call on that? Okay. Motion passes 5-0. Great. Now we go to item 4D, Social Justice Task Force final report and recommendations. But before we do, if we could take a 8-minute break. Thank you. We'll be back in 8 minutes. Has it been 8 minutes? Are we ready? Okay, why don't we get started? Hello, staff.
Hello.
Thank you.
My name is Yvonne Corker, Director of Community Services. We have Jasmine Duckworth here, and Andy Lovano is on Zoom, and she will be making the presentation tonight. Take it away, Andy.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me and see me okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. I actually can't see you currently, so sorry if I am staring into blank space. My name is Andy Lovano, and I am the Community and Legislative Affairs Division Manager. I will provide a short presentation on the Social Justice Task Force and its final set of recommendations and request further guidance from the City Council on next steps. I'm joined tonight by Yvonne Corker, the Director of the Community Services Department, and Jasmine Duckworth, the Community Programs Coordinator in the Community and Legislative Affairs Division. Jasmine also served as the lead staff liaison to the Social Justice Task Force. Diane Burby of the Aspire Group, who served as the facilitator for the Social Justice Task Force, is also present tonight. Before I get started, I would also like to reiterate the thanks to the members of the Social Justice Task Force. They have dedicated many months to this important project and have collaborated on developing a significant set of recommendations to present to you tonight. Their dedication, expertise, and advocacy is appreciated by staff and the community. The Social Justice Task Force was approved on December 7th, 2020. And the purpose of the task force was to advise on social and racial equity issues in West Hollywood and provide policy recommendations to the City Council to address systemic racism in the city of West Hollywood. The Social Justice Task Force began meeting in May 2021. And over the first few months of meeting, the task force received several presentations from staff on relevant city programs and developed the task force's goals and action plan. As discussions continued, the task force identified 3 key areas that they felt should be prioritized for discussions going forward. These 3 priority areas became the task force's 3 subcommittees. They are the Economic Community Development and Contracting Subcommittee, Public Safety Subcommittee, Housing, Homelessness, and Social Services Subcommittee. The task force and task force subcommittees continue to meet regularly and receive presentations from staff. Some of those presentations included an overview of the city's social services program and resources, an update on the exploration of incentives for BIPOC-owned businesses in West Hollywood, and an overview of the city's multi-pronged approach to addressing homelessness and the development of a city behavioral health crisis response unit. In June and July 2022, the Social Justice Task Force presented their recommendations to the public during 2 listening sessions, one held virtually and one in person. And the feedback from those listening sessions was incorporated into the final recommendations in the report. The recommendations outlined reflect the work of the task force following a year of research, assessment, review, and consideration. I want to acknowledge that this is really the first step in this process, and there is much more work that needs to be done in order to ensure that these recommendations come to fruition. Some of the recommendations in the report build on the work that the city has already begun, and other recommendations may benefit from partnerships with outside organizations. City staff is requesting further direction from staff on which recommendations to prioritize for further feasibility analysis and assessment, including city attorney review where needed. For purposes of time tonight, I'll summarize the recommendations, but more detail is provided in the written final report, which is provided as part of tonight's agenda packet. So the first subcommittee is the Economic and Community Development Subcommittee. The purpose of this committee was to focus on ways to enhance economic community development opportunities and provide recommendations that incorporate social and racial equity into the city's contracting and RFP process to increase access to opportunities for BIPOC members in West Hollywood. The recommendations include collect additional demographic data on the annual business registration form, create a dedicated webpage to outline how to open a business in West Hollywood, develop and coordinate a business incubator program marketed primarily to BIPOC entrepreneurs, create a disadvantaged business enterprise certification program, require RFPs to have a minimum of 20% responses from businesses with the majority BIPOC ownership stake. The purpose of the Public Safety Committee was to focus on ways to increase outreach and strengthen relationships between law enforcement agencies and BIPOC community members in West Hollywood. The recommendations include expand legal services and resources to provide expungement or reduced offenses for nonviolent cannabis-related crimes. 1A, expanding on that, examine options for reparations to offset the racial disparity in cannabis-related arrests. Recommendation 2, decriminalize sex work and expand legal services and resources to provide expungement or reduced offenses for nonviolent sex work-related crimes. And 3, continue to examine and investigate the City of West Hollywood's contract with the LA County Sheriff's Department. And the third subcommittee is the Housing, Homelessness, and Social Services Subcommittee. The purpose of this subcommittee was to research opportunities and mechanisms to increase access to housing and social services for BIPOC residents, community members, and members experiencing homelessness in West Hollywood, and to ensure the equitable distribution of services. The recommendations include allocate funds for ongoing operations and services related to Project Home Key through 2025. Designate multiple safe places throughout the city where people can access resources and services. Allocate funds to prioritize hiring of diverse staff, including staff with lived experience, and provide additional funding to maintain and expand rental assistance. As part of this item, staff is asking that council, number 1, provide direction to staff on which recommendation should be prioritized for further feasibility analysis and assessment. The recommendations that are approved by council will become part of staff's work plan, and staff will coordinate with the city attorney to review the recommendations based on council's direction and prioritization. By prioritizing the recommendations, staff can provide additional information, practical and legal analysis, and available resources to implement the priority recommendations in the most effective way possible. And number 2, provide direction on the Social Justice Task Force's recommendation to create a permanent body to continue to advise council on policies and programs to address social and racial equity issues in the community and to increase engagement with West Hollywood's BIPOC community. We do have existing models such as the Ethics Reform Task Force, which meets after each election or on an as-needed basis in the city. So if council provides direction to move forward with a permanent body, staff can evaluate options and return to council for more information. And thank you, that concludes my presentation. Like I said, I can't see you, so for additional questions, I'll try to respond, and Yvonne and Jasmine will also jump in. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Councilmember Erickson, did you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. I don't know who pressed that button, so I'm going to say it's the Halloween spirit. I just have a question. On page 11 for decriminalizing sex work, the council already unanimously did that last year?
Correct. So
okay.
Some of the recommendations endorse efforts that the city has already taken.
Great, thank you. Is there anything else in here that kind of does the same thing or further extrapolates on some of the work council has done and just says do more? Like, I like how this expanded, this saying you did this, but then this also. Is there anything else in here that we should be paying attention to in that way? That's a loaded question. You don't have to answer it on the spot, Jasmine.
I
I'm sorry.
believe there are. If you let me just review some of the recommendations.
Thank you.
I'll provide that.
Yeah, and I can jump in for a second. I agree. I think there are several that kind of endorse or expand upon direction the City Council has already given. The City Council gave direction to kind of generally find ways to incentivize more BIPOC-owned businesses and women-owned businesses in the city, and that was something that the Economic Development Subcommittee really got into in more detail. The Housing and Homelessness Subcommittee really focused on kind of expanding Home Key and kind of wanted to prioritize the urgency of that program, as well as the rental assistance programs. Those are things that the city is already doing, but Social Justice Task Force felt the desire to encourage the existing programs and more.
And then my last question was just because I know we mentioned the Ethics Reform Task Force. That's 3 members, correct? And are they all appointed at large? I can't. I just wanted to remember how we process that.
Yvonne is looking over at me.
I didn't know. I knew you were the city clerk when that happened, but now our very well traversed city clerk. How does that commission work?
Thank you. So the Ethics Reform Task Force was created by the City Council. There were 3 individuals in the initial staff report identified to be on that task force, and so those were the first 3. One of those individuals did not wish to come back when we had the second term of the ERTF, and so he was replaced with Max Kanan, and we have kept those 3 individuals since that time, which I want to say was probably 2018. And we had met again for a period of time, and then we stopped because they work in elections as well, and so they're very busy. So we'll probably convene, I would say, again in January.
Great. So if the city, and I know we'll talk about this later, wanted to convene next steps and everything with a body similar to this, I know previously we selected and then we had at large. If another reincarnation, just an option was a selection of that could be one mode to continue this work?
Yeah, the City Council, if they wanted to do the ERTF model, they could select 3 individuals or 4 individuals to sit as the ethics reform.
Okay. Thank you so much. I just wanted to know all the options that were before.
You're welcome.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I actually have a question about the recommendation to decriminalizing sex work. It was my understanding that what we voted on was to make it a low priority, not necessarily, this is more expansive.
Yeah, we need this. I'm sorry, Mayor. Oh, sorry. Yeah, because I did we do that item together? I can't remember, but it was a while ago. We need the state to decrim sex work, so I think we should. I don't want to get into discussion. I have a couple of ideas.
That's something the city attorney, I think, would then come back to us with what the advocacy is needed, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to public comment. Jonathan Wilson, to be followed by Victor Omolchenko.
Thank you again, for your time. Again, Jonathan Wilson. I'm speaking today not as the chair of the Social Justice Task Force, but as a resident and also as a business owner in the city of West Hollywood. It was on September 18th, 2020 that I first emailed our council members about having some sort of involvement within the city council. And then after a couple exchanges, I reached out to John D'Amico after he suggested I go onto the website and look at where I wanted to be involved. I said, you know what? I said, I'd welcome an opportunity to talk to you about establishing a Black advisory board as a purposeful WeHo response to the call for action resulting from the June 2020 BLM protests. And at that point, that was when things started going into motion. I want to say thank you. I'm glad things were happening in parallel, and it makes me happy that I was part of this journey. I want to say thank you to the staff as well for all of their contributions in making this happen. One of the things that I want to make sure as we move forward, I want to make sure that we also know that there's a sense of urgency around getting this stuff implemented. This is not something that can just sit around for a while. I think that we should all hold ourselves accountable to regular updates on the progress being made for the Social Justice Task Force recommendations. And I'd really welcome that sense of urgency and that sense of stewardship really exists continuously throughout this process. But I really just want to say thank you and also let you know that I'm also here as a resident and business owner to help you or to help the city realize everything that we're recommending. So thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Victor Omolchenko.
Well, Victor Omolchenko, let's not let this very important task force report just end up on a shelf. I participated in one of the early meetings. I also happened to sit in on the last meeting, and I was so happy to see the workings of the task force. I wish that there had maybe been more public in there, coming to the meetings over the year. I counted when I looked through the minutes, because I do read minutes, maybe about 12 people from the public who actually commented. And you know, we just discussed the whole issue about the one-for-one replacement, and homelessness and housing is one of the issues that the task force addressed. And in there, they did mention, and we had talked, and I was so happy that Chair Wilson and the task force agreed to put in additional information, and Andy Lovano and Jasmine Duckworth worked on it about SB 330 and the one-for-one replacement. And the fact that they supported the Holloway Motor Hotel, the Holloway Motel, for becoming a transitional housing place with services, not just like a homeless shelter, but we need those too. But this historic building on our historic Route 66, I'm so happy that you were able to get money from Project Home Key. And one of the recommendations from the task force is that you continue to look into that. And that's why I want to tell you, as a former federal employee, I know how hard it was for states and counties and cities to apply to the federal government for grants. When I read in the LA Times that Los Angeles County Development Authority, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, and the City of Los Angeles returned $150 million in hard-earned federal funds. I don't know about the LA, I don't know that much about LASA, but what was happening in our county? What was happening on our Board of Supervisors? Who is accountable for sending those hard-earned dollars that could have solved homeless and housing problems back to DC? It is so hard to get that money from the feds.
Thank you, Victor.
So I just wanted to say we have to have accountability on these housing and homelessness issues.
Thank you, Victor. Do we have any speakers on Zoom?
No, Mayor, we do not.
Okay, do we have any position papers, position slips? Okay, no?
No, thank you.
Okay. Who wants to say a few words? Councilmember Erickson?
I'll be quick. I do want to thank staff, Yvonne, Jasmine, Andy, everyone involved. This was an undertaking, I think, and not only a brilliant idea brought forth by my colleagues, but then supported by us, but a much needed one. And I know sometimes those new ideas can be challenging when we add another task force or a commission, but I think we've seen it pay off with such dividends here that not only show how it weaved part of the quilt that we have already had as a city, but then it showed the threads that were laid bare. And so to quote Councilmember D'Amico, the promise of the present, but what the work that you did, I do know it's no easy undertaking. So I do really want to thank you, as well as, again, the Social Justice Task Force members. I support all of these recommendations. They are well thought out. They are well thought out doesn't even begin to describe actually how it is. I want to thank the facilitator. Well, although yes, we paid her, but she did a very good job doing that work. And I do want to say that in a city that likes to sit there and say we were the first to do this, or the first to stand up for this, or I don't know, something else that we like to claim on that level of progressive equality, it shows that no city, to quote my colleague again, is ever complete. And I think it shows that even the best cities, like West Hollywood, have work to be done. I support this work. I think this work needs to be done long term. I do agree with Chair Wilson that we need a look at accountability with how these items continue on. So I'm completely supportive of whatever the community is really asking for, or recommendations from staff. We can talk about that later for continuing this work to kind of chart out that progress. I know Mayor Pro Tem Shine did an item about, I think maybe with me, about women-owned businesses and BIPOC-owned businesses, and I do know there are some legal issues when you dedicate city funds, so I know we'll get there when you do it, but I do think this body needs to continue. So yes, I think in there it says, we say thank you, yes, you're done for a while, but I think I want to have the but be underlined and bolded and capitalized, because you're going to come back. And we're going to need you to continue to do this work and help, and also involving the work of our other boards and commissions. And I think their specialized interest is super important. When we look at what, people like Rick Watts, who's still here in the back, has talked about with the Disabilities Advisory Board, those are deeply a part of when we think about how that impacts our BIPOC community members. And I fully support everything written down in this, and I think we need to act now. So I don't know what a feasibility timeline looks like for this, but I would love to see it come back, and for us to continue to make West Hollywood the true promise of what was created in 1984.
Thank you, Councilmember Erickson. Councilmember Horvath?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to see the recommendations from the Social Justice Task Force. They were categorized by different disciplines. I would like to see them assigned to the respective directors inside City Hall, so that way they become part of their work plan. When the council is, after their reorg in January, perhaps one of the meetings in January, after that they can get an update on where those priorities lie, who's responsible for what, and sort of what the directors have determined the timeline for implementation. Some of these seem like they can be made in short order. Some of them seem like they can't take forever, but they're going to need a little bit of thinking through to get it done. And so making sure that our council knows where those priorities are assigned, to whom, in what department, and then have regular status updates brought back to the council, sort of like we do. I think we have quarterly or some sort of regular housing updates, like from the Housing Corp and or other regular updates to the council. It can just be a receive and file in terms of updates. So that way, not only the council and our staff, but all of our public and our members of the task force also know. So that way, if we do see that things are taking a little too long, there's some accountability and there's transparency in the progress that's being made on that program. So it's not, as Victor said, just something that sits on the shelf and collects dust, but actually is put into action. And I think by doing that, we've assigned those responsibilities, and there's accountability and transparency going forward. And then that way, the future council can determine, whether and how this body convenes in the future, whether it's an ongoing basis or if it's like the ethics task force on an as-needed basis to kind of catalyze action. But at least we have sort of a plan to keep it moving. That I'm happy to make that a motion if people like that idea at some point. But those are my thoughts.
Councilmember D'Amico?
Thank you, Mayor. I do like that idea. I think with assigning these items to directors I think I would think that the new council and those who are here would want to see a timeline for implementing or studying or making some progress on each of those items. And with that said, I also think we should ask for this item to return to this body maybe in the first meeting in January, so the new city council members can also have an opportunity to weigh in on how best to make sure that this doesn't, or said in the positive, that this does reach down into the very sort of center of what we do as a city. I think we all have slightly different relationships with the staff and with how our words and our policies turn into daily work by city staff, and I think we need to make sure that the new council members have an opportunity to weigh in on what areas or types of areas that they want to follow for themselves and make sure that get some traction. I guess in some way the main part for me beyond these recommendations is the continuation of the social justice task force. But I guess I have to say that I'm not comfortable with thinking of it as time limited. And maybe no one has suggested that, and that's a thought in my own mind about, a task force seems to have some kind of, period at the end of that, idea. And in my mind, I don't think of our boards and commissions as having ends. I think of them as having work plans and having strategies and having, goals. But I think this can't ever have an end. I mean, the world isn't flat anymore around this stuff. And, we sailed across the Atlantic and the world's not flat anymore. And so here we are, we're looking at an entirely new lens to view our city through. And I know I have an end here, I'm time limited, but I think in some way, I just want to suggest that this does become a board, a permanent part of the future of the city, because I just don't think we're ever going to get to the end of the kinds of things and conversations that can and need to happen. I mean, I know at the start of this, I was interested in the history of discrimination in West Hollywood. The sort of people needing 3 IDs to get into a bar when the 2 people ahead of them and the 75 behind them didn't, or even our own general plan, which had 1 person of color on its 37-member advisory board, and that was in the last 15 years. So I think if there is a motion and it includes making a permanent commitment to the social justice needs of our city, I would like to support that. If it doesn't, I'd like to have an opportunity to at least put forward a separate second motion about how this might continue. And perhaps that also needs to be decided by the 5 people coming in the future, but I don't think so. I think it can be decided now and by us. So thank you, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I absolutely agree that we actually should decide tonight and decide to make the Social Justice Task Force a Social Justice Advisory Board in the city of West Hollywood as a permanent body. One, because there is an urgency to make sure that the work plans are stewarded forward and they should be stewarded by a BIPOC group and not in whiteness. So in order to steward forward the development of the work plans, we need the advisory board to be permanent, and I would like us to make that decision tonight, and the new council can come back and we'll need to appoint new people, obviously, in January. So come back with us in January with a obviously the purview, development, all of that, and there could be the start of this new body moving forward, and we move forward from there. And I absolutely, with everything else that Councilmember Horvath said, I agree with that implementation and support all of the recommendations, and I really sincerely thank you for all the work you've done.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I just have a question for the city attorney. So what are the next immediate steps? Because I think you're involved in that, so the public knows.
Right, I think, staff may have some additional information, but I think we wanted to get sort of a priority of where to start from the council tonight, because it was a long list of recommendations, so that we all know where to focus our efforts. And then really, like you said, if you direct them to different departments, really drill down on what would be needed to implement some of these. If there are legal issues, I'll be looking at them and really coming up with a plan for how to implement the recommendations in the report. Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I agree. Those would be the next steps, just to give us some idea, as Lauren said, what we should start to look at first. And whether the council decides to keep it as a task force or create a board, I think the thing that staff was looking at is that the work that has come out of this board might not lend itself to a monthly meeting, because you need time to sort of have those recommendations looked at, given to the department, sort of come up with a framework that can then go to the board or task force to help fill in some of the gaps before it comes back to council. That project, that program, whether it's the incubator or the things that they have listed there. So that was something that staff was looking at, that it might not be a monthly meeting, and that's why we looked at the Ethics Reform Task Force. So whether it's after the election or they meet annually or biannually, so that they have some meat to look at and weigh in on.
Mayor Pro Tem, you want to?
I was going to, yes. So I think the steps are, we need to come up with a purview for a social justice advisory board. And that purview would obviously include stewarding forward the recommendations that this board has made, but it could also have other purview that we come up with. For example, they may be able to take on some events related to social justice in the city that we have not had in the past. They may perhaps be able to be the body that we just got a recommendation at our nightlife safety special meeting, that we have a body look at specific nightlife safety issues and sexual assaults in the city. So perhaps this is something that the Public Safety Subcommittee of the Social Justice Advisory Board can look at. I don't think this is going to happen right away, obviously, but the steps that I see is coming back to us in January to the new council with a purview, and a staff report of recommendation for purview, kind of like what we did with the LGBTQ commission that we just created. In the meantime, we can give you, and here's the thing, I know there's a lot of recommendations, but they're all really good, and most of them we've already done. So if you whittle those down, there isn't that much left. Councilmember Horvath's direction, and we basically support all of them. Councilmember Horvath's direction is to send them to the specific departments, and the city attorney would first have to give a legal analysis, obviously, of what we can and can't do, and then the departments take that on. We develop the purview, approve it, appoint the members, then the items go to the board and go on from there. And then they would come back to us for actual implementation into ordinances or policies or whatever we need to do. Does that make sense? Yes.
You have a question? Go ahead, Councilmember Eric. No, it's all right. Go ahead.
There's nothing like to Mayor Pro Tem Shine's point with, and your comment, Yvonne, that an advisory board doesn't have to meet every month. For example, if and when the purview came back, staff recommended, oh, this board should actually meet quarterly, 4 times a year, because that will give 2 months for whatever topic that's being addressed with a work plan, and then so-and-so, right? And then there's nothing stopping us from going outside of our normal.
Correct. Yeah, so when we, because they'd be adopted by resolution, so when we drafted, as well as their bylaws, we could say they meet on the second Tuesday of March, the second Tuesday of June, the second, we could identify it that way. And then they could have a special meeting if needed to discuss any issue that needed to be addressed immediately.
And look, City Attorney Lauren Langer, what is it? Proposition 206? What is the proposition?
209.
209. And just for the public's edification, could you just briefly state what 209 talks about?
Sure, it is and I actually spoke to the task force about it a few months ago. It's a proposition that was adopted by the California voters that prevents giving preferences based on race in public contracting and public education.
Thank you. And that's a part of the whole legal stuff, obviously. So I think we have to be nimble in every way that we do this. So I personally think whatever motion is on this floor, I will support.
Right, and we know that the next steps include Lauren, our city attorney, looking at the recommendations and going to directors, and then we'll know if there are some things that can be done or can't be done. And I was just going to thank the Social Justice Task Force again and say, don't go away. And it looks like you're not going away, so that's good. I'm supportive of a task force, advisory board, however, whatever way makes sense for us to move forward. And I see we have a motion on the floor. Mayor Pro Tem, thank you again for your passion about this, and we'll take a vote. Okay, motion passed 5-0. Thanks again. And now we're going to move on to item 4E, appointments to the Historic Preservation Commission, Russian-Speaking Advisory Board, and Women's Advisory Board. Where do we begin? Yes.
Thank
Madam
you.
City Clerk.
Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. Mayor Pro Tem, are you ready to make okay, so we will table that. Are we ready to make an at-large appointment to the Historic Preservation Commission?
Yes, I would like.
Go ahead.
I would like to nominate our former appointee who has reapplied, and we would like to welcome back onto the commission.
Yauer Charlie, is there a second? Councilmember Erickson? By consensus, does the council agree? Perfect. Sure. So Yauer Charlie is our new appointee to the Historic Preservation Commission. Are we ready to make an at-large Women's Advisory Board?
I would like to nominate Olivia Lane.
Okay.
I think that was her full name, right?
Yeah, Olivia Lane.
Okay.
And I was going to nominate Kat Lockwood.
I'm happy to second Kat as well.
So I guess we'll do a...
Yeah, I'll just do a voice vote. And so Councilmember D'Amico, Olivia Lane, or Kat Lockwood?
Kat Lockwood.
Thank you. Councilmember Erickson?
Olivia Lane.
Councilmember Horvath?
Kat Lockwood.
Mayor Pro Tem Shine?
Olivia Lane.
Kat Lockwood.
Okay, Kat Lockwood is our new appointee to the Women's Advisory Board.
Congratulations, Kat.
Thank you.
And what is left on our agenda? Do we have anything else? Well, let's see, new business meeting schedule went on to consent, and then legislative 6A went to consent, and 6B went to consent, And do we have any public comment?
I do not have anyone signed up in chambers or on Zoom for public comment.
Okay, that's nice. And do we have any additional council member comments?
I just wanted to, if I may, Mayor, to Mayor Pro Tem's comments about some of the recent headlines and activity in the city next door. I just wanted to take a moment, and I spoke with one of my colleagues about this earlier. I think our city being on record sharing our love to the son of Mike Bonin, who has been the unnecessary target of incredibly awful comments as he grows up in our community, we hope. I want him to know that he is appreciated and cared for, and that he has the right to make mistakes and be whatever kind of beautiful, wonderful child he will be. And just because his dad is in the public eye doesn't mean that he doesn't have the right to grow up in the way that is safe and best for him and for his family. And so I just wanted to extend my love, and I'm sure our community's love, to their family. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Horvath. Anybody else? If not, then we are adjourned until November 7th, Monday, November 7th, 6 p.m., West Hollywood Park Council Chambers at 6 p.m. See you then.